Welcome back, fantasy football fans. I know that last time you saw us live on StreamYard, it didn't go so well. We had some technical difficulties. Hopefully, this time it goes a little bit smoother because this time we're talking about the NFL draft. We're going through this is our live mock draft that we do every single season. And we love to do it usually within a week of the actual NFL draft because so much can change every single day leading up to the draft. So I'm going to go ahead and start this thing off and explaining how we do this. And first things first that you need to know, you will be able to see our picks live as we go through this on StreamYard. So if you're listening back to this and you're listening on the podcast side of things, because we were doing a live podcast while we're doing it live on StreamYard. So if you're listening to it afterwards, go ahead, check out the StreamYard video so you can follow along and see all of our picks. But I guess first things first, Parker, explain to the fans out there how we go ahead and do this live mock draft process.
All right, so it's going to be pretty simple. We'll go through each pick and just sort of make our own decision. This isn't something that we are doing consensusly. Taylor has his own mock. I've got my own. And we're going to be sharing our screen for the people who are on YouTube and Twitter. If you're listening on the podcast, you'll just have to go find the video recording on our YouTube or our Twitter. So what we're going to do is share our screen. We're using the Pro Football Network NFL Mock Draft Simulator. It's a really great tool. The only thing I wish you could do is undo a pick, but that's just me. So we're going to begin. Taylor, I'll throw it to you first. Pick number 1. You are on the clock as the Jacksonville Jaguars. You have a lot of options on the table because you have a lot of needs.
Yeah, so if I were the Jaguars, the number one thing that you go through and you're trying to figure out what these teams need, because at the end of the day, that's really the question. What exactly do the teams, what's their number one priority? Because for a lot of these teams, they only have at least the playoff teams, they only have a few huge needs, whereas a lot of the teams at the top here, you could go anywhere, at both sides of the football. There's so many different specific picks and players. However, this draft class specifically, I feel like it caters towards mostly the defensive side of the ball in this top 10, which is actually the exact opposite of last year. So I want to jump in here and probably explore the defensive side of the football with the Jacksonville Jaguars, because we all know that they desperately need help on the defense because they lost a couple of players during the offseason. Now, however, they did gain some very impressive free agent signings. So that is something that we have to remember as we're going through here. But I think really I've seen a lot of different guys go here at number 1. We've seen people like Aiden Hutchinson, even Evan Neal, even guys like Malik Willis fly up the board. Trayvon Walker, who I have seen some interesting stuff about him in the Jaguars recently. And here's what I'm going to say. Last year, I called a very specific pick in the top 3, and that was Trey Lance. Okay, I called
Trevor
that.
Lawrence, number 1.
Yeah. And everyone was saying how, it was a smoke screen. They were going after, Mac Jones the whole time. And they did actually go after Trey Lance. And so I'm going to do a little bit of the opposite. Last year, I called that it was not a smoke screen. This time, I'm going to say that one specific thing, and that is Trayvon Walker to the Jags is a smoke screen that is not actually going to happen. I think what they actually want to do is go out and get a different edge rusher, and they're just trying to, draw some eyes towards someone who they are not going to go after, just to, see if they can get one of these other teams to bite. So I'm going to go with the Jaguars taking probably the top guy off the board in not Aiden Hutchinson, believe it or not. They're going to go ahead and snag Kayvon Thibodeau from Oregon because I think that he fits what they need. They need edge rusher extremely badly. They don't really have anyone to pair up with Josh Allen. So right now it's pretty much a one-trick pony out there. They did sign Fatukasi to plug the middle of that defensive line, which is a really good pickup for them. However, they still need someone to pair up with Josh Allen. He can't do it by himself. Otherwise, he's going to turn into Khalil Mack, where he gets double teamed every single play. All right. And you saw how that played out for Khalil Mack down the line. So I guess my point is I think he's going to be the top pick over Aiden Hutchinson simply because I don't think that the Jaguars like Hutchinson as much as everyone else does.
That's interesting, Taylor. We're already going to disagree right off the bat, which is something that we don't typically do. I am a big fan of what Aiden Hutchinson did at Michigan. And I saw him ruin Penn State and Ohio State a few times this season. So Hutchinson is my pick here, the edge rusher from Michigan. And he paired up nicely with David Ojabo, who we'll talk about a little bit later, I'm sure. What I really like about Hutchinson is just his pure size as the edge rusher. He's 6'6", which not many edge rushers are this big, like this tall. You know, TJ Watt is 6'4", Von Miller is like 6'2" or 6'3". Hutchinson has some size to him, which can help him on the line, bat some balls down. He doesn't always need to get as close to the quarterback as other people may need to. I think Thibodeau is a more natural athlete than Hutchinson is, but this doesn't deter me from thinking Hutchinson is the guy. I don't think the Jags are going to go anywhere else besides edge rusher here because they've got a solid offensive line, so they don't need to take a top tackle. They don't obviously need a quarterback. The one place I could see them entertaining a little bit is safety, but I just don't see anything that has a more glaring need than the edge rushing position. Because let's be honest, that is sort of the key to unlocking your defense. If you can't get to the quarterback, your defense is going to give up 30, 40 points a game. So Aiden Hutchinson is the move here. Looks like we are on the board with edge rushers, Taylor, but just different guys.
Yeah, so the main reason I didn't have Hutchinson going number 1 overall, I really thought about it, but it's simply because I know a lot of people are going to find this funny. I want him to go to the hometown team, despite the fact that as a Vikings fan, it would pain me to see him go there. But I'm putting aside my fandom. I would love to see him go to the hometown team, which is where I'm going to start my talking about pick number 2 here, and Aiden Hutchinson going to the Detroit Lions. I think that, like you talked about, he is probably the best player in this draft class in terms of heading into the draft, at least. That can change afterwards, leading into their NFL careers. But going into the draft, he has the best, I think, just talent coming in. And then on top of it, the best film to pair up with that. So I think that he is probably going to be the best player. And the main reason is just because I think it would be fun to see him go to the hometown team in a sense, because he went to Michigan and Detroit's right down the street. So I think that would be a really cool pairing. And also Detroit, come on, let's just let Detroit have one good player. I mean, why not?
Let them have one good thing.
Yeah, exactly. And I know a lot of people are talking about Detroit doing different things with this number 2 overall pick, even trading out of it, which I think that mainly, I don't think that these top, 3 or 4 teams are going to be able to trade out of their picks because there's such value with having a top pick. I don't think they're going to go ahead and trade away from that. And then on top of that, I think that a lot of teams don't want to trade up and, risk all of that for a draft class. Let's be honest, is lackluster, I'd say overall. So and then a lot of people are talking about Malik Willis, and I thought about Malik Willis going to the Lions, but I think there's something to the fact that the Lions have kind of supported Jared Goff in a sense. And not only that, I think there's something to the fact that they're stockpiling future picks. I think that that's something that the people need to keep an eye on, because I don't think that the Lions are going after their franchise quarterback in this draft.
Yeah, I agree. And I actually think it would be sort of a slap in the face to Jared Goff as well, because he didn't. If you watch the games last year, yes, Jared Goff wasn't great, but he wasn't the reason they were losing every game. And the primary reason is the defense, and they need to fix it. And this is where I personally am going to go with Kayvon Thibodeau here. His tape is electric. He played in the Pac-12, so he played against some good competition out of Oregon. And truthfully, I think he didn't deserve the number 1 pick because, well, let's just be honest, you didn't hear about him that much this season. He has the intangibles. We know that he's a great player. But if one of these 2 guys is going to bust, it's going to be, in my opinion, it'll be Thibodeau. I don't think either of them are going to, but that is always a possibility. We've seen it happen before.
Yeah.
But I think Kayvon and Hutchinson share a very similar sort of ceiling, and that is Jadeveon Clowney. Jadeveon Clowney is not the best edge rusher. He's certainly not the worst. I would say Clowney has been a top 10 edge rusher since he's entered the league. And that's where these guys will be. They're not going to be the best. They're not even going to be third best. But they're going to be enough to get these basement teams up a couple steps in their division. I think if any team has the potential to go worst to first this year, it's the Jaguars. So, and Taylor, that's a podcast we'll get to for another time. But looks like Hutchinson and Thibodeau are our consensus first 2 picks, just in reverse order for each other. And we are on to the Texans at number 3, who have just the door wide open for pretty much anything they want to do.
Yeah, the Texans they have so much needs, or just so many needs. Excuse me. The needs are literally
there, Taylor.
Yeah, really good. There's like the amount of lackluster talent that they have is immense compared to the few players that they have that you can be like, oh, that guy, he's a starter. You know what I mean? There's not a lot of those on the Texans team right now. So they are pretty much going, if I were them, I would go best player available. If I looked at my board and I was like, you know what, who is the best player who is out there? And I think that for the Texans, though, that means different things than some other teams. Okay. The best player available for them might be a little bit different than another team. And I think a lot of people are going to point at offensive tackle and Evan Neal from Alabama and say, oh, that is where they're probably going to go. And I think that could be a possibility. However, I'm going to shake things up a little bit more just because I like to be fun. And it's not going to be Evan Neal here. And believe it or not, it's actually not going to be any of the top guys that you see immediately. And it's actually going to go, they're going to dive a little bit deeper because he's gotten a little bit of interest from these top teams. And that is actually the offensive tackle from North Carolina State. I'm not sure exactly how to say his name.
I believe it's pronounced Ikem Ekwonu.
Ikem Ekwonu. Okay. So Ekwonu, I don't
know. I'm probably messing it up too.
However, the NC State product here, I think that he is something that the Texans need. They need offensive line help. They need every sort of help, but especially on the offensive line, because if you look at what the Texans have done, they for many years had a staple at tackle in Dwayne Brown before he left the building to go to Seattle. And then they, of course, traded for Laramie Tunsil. So they have a staple left tackle, but they still need someone to pair up on the other side to protect whatever quarterback starts for them for the future, whether that be Davis Mills or someone else. They need some protection for that guy because, as we've seen, tackle is probably the second most important position on your roster outside of the quarterback. So looking at that, you need a top-notch tackle. I think they are actually going to go away from, the top guy in Evan Neal. I've heard some different rumors that they actually like Ekwonu. So I'm going to go ahead and throw him here at number 3. And it's also just going to shake the board up a little bit, which I think is always fun.
Taylor, this is a good pick, but not something I agree with. So this might be the most interesting draft we've done in a while, just for us, because usually we agree on a lot of things without even speaking about it beforehand. But yes. I'm going to go defense here because they were bad, just bad last year on defense. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. Lovie Smith, their new defensive-minded head coach, came out today in a press conference and said, we need a cornerstone defensive player. All right. And he did say it's position, but I'm going to sort of cliffhang you for a little bit. All right. The guy who I'm about to throw into the conversation here played most recently in the college football playoffs. Okay. Lots of good talent there, obviously. But it's not the big school you think. All right. I'm going to go to the University of Cincinnati with Sauce Ahmad Gardner. He checks the boxes for Lovie Smith. He may be the best cover corner we've seen in a long, long time. He had 6 picks and 12 pass deflections over his last 20 games from 2019 to 2020. Now, one thing that people sort of knock him for is maybe he's not as physical of a corner as you want him to be. However, he is a smart corner. And I think this is what the Texans need at this point. They need somebody who knows what's going to happen because they didn't have anybody who knew what was going on the field. So Gardner is a guy who locks down receivers. He did not allow a touchdown last season, which is just crazy. Given the fact that he played a lot of good receivers, especially in the championship, not the championship game, the semifinal game against Alabama. Gardner's a great corner, and I think is worthy of this number 3 overall pick.
Interesting. I do like Sauce Gardner. However, I thought about him at number 3, but here's what I'm thinking. Here's my theory behind this. Okay. I decided to instead of having Lovie Smith go out there and go ahead and snag a defensive player with that 3rd pick, I think that Lovie Smith believes in his ability to coach up defense. And so I think he's going to use this pick on the offensive side of the football where I'm not saying that he doesn't have as much expertise necessarily. He can't coach up offense, but I'm just saying I think he believes in his defensive capabilities a little bit better. So that's where I'm going to go with that. That's why I chose the offensive tackle.
Yeah, I like the move. Certainly a lot of disparity between our drafts so far, but we're at pick 4. The Jets are on the board. Where do they go? Because the Jets, they're like the top 3 teams. They need everything.
Yeah, what's interesting with the Jets is it's at this point with the Jets, it is operation. Let's build this team up around Zach Wilson as much as possible during his rookie contract. And so you're pretty much by the end of this rookie contract for Zach Wilson, they will know whether he's their guy or not. Okay. And if you're a Jets fan, that's what you want, right? You want to be able to know whether this is your starting quarterback of the future.
Is he going to be getting the Daniel Jones treatment?
Well, let's take a look here. So I think that it might be similar to that because, however, what I am going to skew away from is the offensive side of the ball because the Jets desperately need defensive help. You look at what that secondary was last season, and it was god awful. It was one of the worst secondaries in the NFL. And then on top of that, the fact that they don't have any players that are necessarily coming back. Okay. A lot of the players that were decent on that team last year left. So you look at it and the Jets they don't have any defensive, really a lot of defensive help. And then on top of that, especially on the secondary, you look at the corners and the safeties and they are just, they make me want to puke. And then they lost Marcus May during this offseason. And a lot of people thought that they might go out and try and snag someone else to replace Marcus May in free agency, and that didn't necessarily happen. So I'm going to go ahead and replace him right here in the draft because they did go out and sign Jordan Whitehead in free agency. However, he plays strong safety. He's a hard hitting safety. He's not free safety. All right. And Marcus May, they need someone to play on the other side of the football field, and that's going to be Kyle Hamilton from Notre Dame. I'm going to go ahead and sneak him in here at number 4. I think that he fits one of their top needs perfectly, and that pretty much solidifies safety for the next 5 to 6 seasons at least for them on both sides. Because if Whitehead works out, he's only 24, 25 years old, so he's going to be able to be a staple in that defense for years to come, as well as obviously Kyle Hamilton coming in as a rookie. Assuming he works out and pans out pretty well for him, then all of a sudden they have a duo at safety that we haven't seen in a decent while in the NFL. So I'm going to go ahead and say that the Jets build the defense up. And on top of that, Robert Saleh, I know a lot of people are going to look at it and be like, well, they are probably going to go ahead and focus on the pass rushing side because he is a defensively minded coach, especially defensive line. And that's where his expertise is. However, I think that with his what we've seen from him, they don't need to go up front because he can coach up anyone to become a really good defensive line player. It doesn't matter what position across the defensive line, he's able to get the job done. So I believe in his ability there. I think that he's going to go ahead and focus on the defensive secondary.
Yeah, this is where I'm going with my pick as well. It just makes too much sense. They didn't get, yes, they got Whitehead, but Hamilton's going to provide such versatility to that defense. He can cut the field in half without a problem. He was that kind of player at Notre Dame ever since he started. And to me, it's the no-brainer pick for the Jets. Now, a lot of people were thinking, well, what about an offensive lineman? They don't need anybody on the offensive line. They have a good offensive line. All right. And we have George Fant. We have Mekhi Becton. They have pieces in the middle. The Jets are fine on the offensive line. But Zach Wilson can't play defense. Michael Carter can't play defense. You need somebody who can help you at multiple levels on the field, and that is Kyle Hamilton. I think it's a smart pick for the Jets, and I'd truly be disappointed if they went somewhere else. So, Taylor, I'm going to stay here in New York. That's the first pick we actually agreed on, by the way. But I'll go to the other New York team in the Giants. So they have pick number 5 and pick number 7 in this draft. I truthfully would not, if I were a Giants fan, I would not want them to trade out of these 2 picks because you are guaranteed at least one of them to hit, but just based on the way the Giants have drafted over the past few years. All right. It hasn't been pretty all the time, Andrew Thomas, but I think they make up for their woes with at least one of these picks. And with pick 5, they're going to go with the offensive tackle Evan Neal from Alabama. The dude's a freaking giant, 6'7", 360 pounds. He's just massive, all right? I don't think that his mobility will be a problem either because we've seen bigger guys play in the league for a long time. So to me, Neal is a smart pick. You can always move Andrew Thomas, all right? But he's not the answer at the left tackle spot. You need to get somebody in there who's going to help Saquon, protect Daniel Jones' blind side, and not have him get sacked and run around like a chicken with his head cut off. So Evan Neal is
Are you sure that's just not the way he plays?
Well, it could be, but I think Neal will help that a little bit. We can only do so much for Daniel Jones. We give him 80 yards of open field, and he still falls on his ass. All right, but Evan Neal is the pick here. He is the second highest guy on PFN's board, but I think he's perfectly fine here at pick 5.
Yeah, I'm going to actually jump in here and agree with you. Evan Neal is my pick for the Giants, and he's the reason why I didn't have the Texans selecting him, actually. They're the reason, excuse me. I didn't have the Texans selecting him because I feel like he fits the Giants, what they look for in offensive linemen. And what I really like, I know a lot of people are going to say, well, the Giants need linebacker extremely badly. And that's true. But I feel like there's no good linebacker to select here at this spot because personally, I don't think that pick number 5, that's a perfect spot to select a linebacker. I think you can get that with either your second pick or even trading back with your next pick and maybe selecting it later in the first round. I just feel like for the Giants, they need the offensive line help. They desperately need it. Nate Solder, they finally got rid of and went to free agency. And the last few years, that was one of the worst signings in Dave Gettleman's history. When that says something because he's had some really...
I was about to say he's had a lot of those.
Yes, and so now that they finally pushed Gettleman out of the building along with some of his signings, I think they're looking to start new, and they're going to start new by actually hitting on this offensive line pick in the first round, which is something they haven't been able to do recently. And I know they went out and signed, obviously, Mark Lewinsky, the guard from Indianapolis, and I think that was a great signing for them, and it does help them out. However, they still need offensive tackle to replace Nate Solder. Nate Solder played right tackle towards the end of his career, and let's be honest, even if they don't move Andrew Thomas and he stays at left tackle, Evan Neal can play anywhere on the offensive line outside of center. And honestly, he probably could play center if they really asked him to. Mm-hmm. Because at the end of the day, Evan Neal, we've seen him play guard. He played guard in 2019, and then he turned around and played tackle in 2020 and was phenomenal in both spots. So I think that he is a versatile player along the offensive line that the Giants need. So let's be honest, the Giants have had a lot of injury issues also across that offensive line over the last few seasons. So I'm going to go ahead and say Evan Neal is the perfect pickup for him to help, alleviate the absolute massacre that has been up front for the Giants over the last few seasons.
Yeah, massacre is a really good word for this Giants football team right now. And that this team can change very quickly, depending on what happens with Daniel Jones this offseason. So, good insight there on Evan Neal. We're through the first 5 picks, and I think at pick 6, we're gonna get interesting. At least I'm gonna get interesting.
Well, here
All
we
right,
go.
we're gonna have our first quarterback off the board, and it makes sense to me because you can't go into this season telling yourself Sam Darnold is my starting quarterback. You cannot look yourself in the mirror and tell yourself Sam Darnold is going to be your starting quarterback for 17 games this season. It's just not going to happen. I'm
What are you
sure
talking about, bro? Sam Darnold is the answer, man.
he is as much of the answer as Jamarcus Russell at this point in his career. But truthfully, the Panthers have a lot of options. They don't necessarily need to go quarterback. Darnold is somewhat competent. I think he needed help last year, but they need to go a different route. If they want to turn their franchise around, if David Tepper wants to save his job, he's going to do the right thing here and draft Malik Willis. Willis, we see he has incredible creativity. He's flashy, he's smart. He's pretty safe with the football. Only has 6 interceptions last year at Liberty. Uh, there is concern. So he was only a 1-year starter at Liberty because he was at Auburn, didn't really get the chance to start. Transferred to Liberty, smaller school, still put up good numbers. And we talked about this in a recent show. He's this Konami code type of quarterback who is brilliant for fantasy purposes and can really help your team in real life. We've seen what Kyler Murray and Lamar Jackson can do for their football team. It's not crazy to think that Malik Willis can't do the same. So he's my pick here at number 6. I don't want to dwell on it too much, but Taylor, where do you go with pick 6 here?
This is interesting because I too have the draft shaking up here at pick number 6. I kind of had it shaking up at the beginning, but just for purposes, this is where it really gets interesting because from here on out, you don't know who's going to be going where. Now, the Carolina Panthers, one thing that I have to point out is they went all in on the Deshaun Watson sweepstakes and lost. Okay. So I think at this point, they are all in the quarterback realm. Okay. They need to get one. I think they know that. And right now, if they don't go ahead and try and get a quarterback in the first round here, then I think they're failing their fan base. The fans, they went out and said to the fans, we're going to fix this. We're going to try and get you someone that can be a starter for years to come. And obviously they already kind of said that Sam Darnold was not the answer. That experiment failed, and so they're going to move on. And so that means a quarterback will be selected by the Panthers. The question is where, though, and which one. Okay, I think the Panthers will use the 6th pick for a QB, but you mentioned that Malik Willis fit that mold pretty well. And what is interesting about Malik Willis is he kind of fits the Cam Newton mold, and they had
Yep.
Cam Newton for many years.
They had
However,
success too.
yes, they did have success. However, I think they're going to try and do something a little different. I think that they're going to try and, shake things up a bit because they need something different. They did the Cam Newton thing, and yes, they had some success, but they never actually won a Super Bowl with Cam Newton. So I think they're going to try going a little bit different route, and he's going to come up the board a bit because I've heard that they really do like him out there. And this is one where I don't think that it's necessarily a smoke screen. I think Kenny Pickett is going to be the pick here at number 6, just because I think that Pickett fits the mold of something different for them. So I like that. And overall, I think that obviously they need a quarterback. I don't necessarily know that they're in love with Malik Willis, to be honest. I think that they do like the ability that he has with his legs, but I don't know that they think he's the answer long term. I think they would rather go Kenny Pickett for, a little bit different style because at the end of the day, they know Kenny Pickett can throw the football, and that's been the biggest issue for Sam Darnold. He can't throw the football. So I think that's where they're going.
Yeah, I like Pickett a lot. I got to see him play at Pittsburgh a few times because they had some matchups against Penn State. But truthfully, I think Pickett is one of the most pro-ready quarterbacks in the draft, just because of the system he played in at Pitt. I don't like him this high, personally, but I think you and I are um, on the right track with the Panthers needing a quarterback. We know teams who need quarterbacks, they go get them in the draft. They don't mess around with that pick. The Browns have done it 13 times in the past 15 years. But, what can you do? If you need a quarterback, you go get the guy. And if they think Pickett's the guy, great. But I'm going to move on. The Giants are on the board again. We're not going to do any trades in this draft, by the way. We're just going to straight shoot it for tonight's purposes. But pick 7, the Giants are back on the clock, and they have a lot of team needs, if we're being totally honest here. And it's kind of hard to pinpoint what is important in the Giants' eyes. We already grabbed Evan Neal for them. Now, I don't think they're going to go receiver here. They have a lot of options on defense where they need to go because they didn't get anybody in free agency. And I think they're going to be in for a really tough time if they don't go defense here. But knowing the Giants, things could get a little fishy with this pick. I also don't think it's out of the possibility where we go 2 offensive linemen, because why not? Realistically, I think the Giants don't do that, but they have the door open for pretty much anything at this point. So this is actually a really tough pick for me, trying to figure out what the Giants are gonna do. Wow, that was bad.
That actually pained me to listen to.
I've had a long day, but for me here, I think it's got to be Trayvon Walker. They need defensive help as well. I know they have Lorenzo Carter, but he's nothing, if we're being totally honest. And that defense, they need help on all the levels right now. So Walker is a pick for me. This is a difficult pick, I'll be totally honest, because nothing just seemed to fall in place for me right now without them reaching for something. So I think this is a possibility where in real life they do trade back from pick 7 to maybe, I don't know, maybe a team like the Eagles want to move up or something like that. Because we've seen the Eagles move up because they have some draft capital this year. We'll see. Trayvon Walker's my pick. Taylor, I'm going to go to you.
Well, the simple answer here for me is going to be that you mentioned how bad their defense is, and I mentioned they needed a linebacker. However, I honestly think they could trade out of the 7th pick and maybe trade down a little bit during the draft. But obviously, we aren't doing trades here, so I'm just going to go ahead and throw defensive talent on this team, and I am going to agree with you that Trayvon Walker is going to be that guy for them. Obviously, they do need some help on the defensive front. Now they have some people, and obviously they have Leonard Williams, who is getting paid quite heftily. And then they also have a few other players throughout but none of them are like superstar level guys,
Yeah.
So at the end of the day, Leonard Williams is a run stuffing machine. He's not necessarily a pass rusher per se. So I think that they need a pass rusher, and Trayvon Walker can be that guy. You mentioned Lorenzo Carter, and I believe, if I'm not mistaken, he's on either the last year of his rookie contract upcoming or maybe one more after that, but he might be out the door if he doesn't do something soon. So I'm going to go ahead and go with Trayvon Walker. I agree with you. They need the defensive help. And right here, there's not a whole lot of other players that make sense for them defensively. So I'm going to go ahead and maybe say Trayvon Walker here at 7, just because I think that it makes the most sense for them long term.
Yeah, this is a tough pick, but you can't go wrong with picking someone on the defensive side of the ball for the Giants. They did manage to over the past couple of years acquire guys like Leonard Williams and Adoree Jackson, and they drafted guys like Xavier McKinney. But truthfully, the team hasn't come together as a unit yet, and I think that's what the Giants could start to accumulate with this acquisition of Walker through the draft. So I'm going to move on to my next pick. And I'm going to go back to the opposite side of the ball because this team, while I think Trayvon Walker, if he slips past the Giants at 7, he's a slam dunk pick for the Falcons at 8. But that's not going to be the case because Walker is gone. I'm actually going to go with a pass catcher because, let's be honest, the Falcons have none. Garrett Wilson will be the pick at pick 8 for the Falcons. The first receiver off the board goes number 8 overall to the Falcons. This offense needs to get younger yesterday. They did so with Matt Ryan leaving. Calvin Ridley, he'll be 29 before he comes back after his suspension. We saw them draft Kyle Pitts last year, which was really good. Cordell Patterson had an age 30-plus breakout that nobody ever saw coming. But they can get young at receiver and talented at receiver if they go with Garrett Wilson because Russell Gage is in Tampa Bay now. And I think the top guy you have is Olamide Zaccheaus. And truthfully, I can't name another Falcons receiver off the top of my head right now. So if that shows you what the Falcons need, it's receiver. So Garrett Wilson's my pick here at 8.
All right, I think that I'm going to go ahead and, this pick is hard to decide because I think the Falcons are one of those teams that very easily could be looking to move from this pick come draft time. So
Really?
I do believe that. I've heard some rumors, and I think that they could be looking to ship the pick for future draft capital. However, I think that Atlanta, if I were them, it's tough. You mentioned wide receiver. Garrett Wilson does make some sense there. Obviously, they need some defensive help. But there are no, you got Jermaine Johnson, but I feel like that's a little bit of a reach at this point on the edge. And then outside of that, on the defensive side, they have the offensive side, excuse me, they have some needs along the offensive line, but there aren't really any slam dunk offensive linemen right now. Charles Cross, I don't think is going to be someone they fall in love with during this draft process. And obviously we know that they need a quarterback. They were another team that went in on the Deshaun Watson sweepstakes and lost, which ended up making Matt Ryan, longtime quarterback, leave the building and go to Indianapolis. So right now they're rolling with Marcus Mariota. So I don't know. I feel like just for fun, I'm going to go ahead and say this because I don't know where he would go otherwise. I'm going to say Malik Willis goes ahead and goes to the Falcons. Now, let me explain this to you real quick. Many years ago, the time was 2004, and the Atlanta Falcons had, I believe it was the 8th overall pick again in that draft class. And they went out and selected one quarterback who many people may know, Michael Vick. Okay.
No, it wasn't 2000.
No,
I thought Michael Vick was the first overall pick.
I forget. But anyways, someone recently said that with the 8th pick, it could be a repeat though. And I like it. Malik Willis, repeat, Michael Vick. He's the same type of player. He's got the wheels. He's got the ability. They've gone out. They've had history of loving those types of players, those running quarterbacks before Matt Ryan. Okay. So excluding the Matt Ryan phase, which obviously he was a Stone Age pony, can't move in the pocket at all. All right. So, that excluding that, I think before that, we saw them do the Michael Vick thing and it worked out. Sold a lot of tickets too. Everyone loved Michael Vick until everything that happened with him. So I think they're going to go out and go ahead and try and hit with Malik Willis because I think they're trying to move out of the age of the Matt Ryans, the Big Bens and stuff like that, and into the new age quarterback. And so why not take a chance at one of these guys? Because at the end of the day, the Falcons need it. And I don't think that Marcus Mariota is their answer long-term. I think he's just a possible stopgap in the meantime. But I think Malik Willis could take something and learn maybe from Marcus Mariota like Trey Lance did for a season.
Yeah, I think Willis would be benefited by sitting for a year or at least half a season. And Mariota's a great guy to learn from. They're very similar in the tools they bring to the table. So I like it. But Willis has already gone on my board, so I can't really go back and change that. But we're here at pick 9 for the Seattle Seahawks. And plainly put, they need someone to protect whoever's going to play quarterback for them because they have a very weak offensive line at this point. They did acquire a couple guys in the middle during the free agency process, but they need a guy to protect the edges, protect the blind side, if you will. So I am going to go with Ike Ekwonu, my highest remaining offensive tackle, or I guess my highest current offensive tackle. The tackle from North Carolina State, who was just a freak of nature for the pack this past season. North Carolina State upset Clemson. They had a really good ACC play kind of year, and Ekwonu led the way. And he's going to be the guy. Basically, you look at him like a Dwayne Brown now because he's with Seattle. I think it's a really good comparison. Maybe not necessarily the same size, but he's going to play with the same tenacity and the ferociousness that you need from a staple tackle. And truthfully, he reminds me a lot of Mekhi Becton. Becton's only going into his second or third year, but Ekwonu just draws comparisons for his physique and the style of play. I like Ekwonu a lot. Taylor, you put him pick at 3, I believe, but I have him falling a little bit to pick 9. I like him here for Seattle because they need that franchise tackle to protect, whether it be Drew Lock or another quarterback in the near future. So he's my pick.
Interesting. I like the offensive line route that you're going here. And so with that in mind, I think that I usually would say yes and agree with you and go that route. However, I have a guy that's on my board that you don't have on your board anymore, and that is Sauce Gardner. And I think that Seattle is going to anger a lot of people by going out there and doing this. But I think that they already have extra draft capital. So they're going to go ahead and make the pick for the best player available. And at this point, it will be Sauce Gardner. I think that he's going to be a staple corner for them because think about it. Right now, they are desperate for help on the defensive side of the football. Secondary, they no longer have any piece of the Legion of Boom. It is a time long gone. And so I think they're going to try and recreate that and starting with Ahmad Gardner here because they desperately need someone to be their number one corner because they have some people who can play. I believe DJ Reed, who I know he hit free agency. However,
DJ Reed signed him with the Jets.
So he's out of the building, and then they turn around, and I think they should still have Sidney Jones, if I'm not mistaken.
Yep, and they do have Jamal Adams in the secondary as well.
And so obviously they have safety in the back end, but they need someone to pair them with. They don't have the number one guy, and I think Gardner could be that for a decade plus to come. So why not go ahead and snag a player like that? Because with the Seahawks right now, with that 9th pick, are in a perfect situation to go BPA. I don't think they're going to take a quarterback in this draft class. And it's simply because they traded for Drew Lock. I don't think they're just going to go say he's already not the answer. I think that they go ahead and, give him 1 year of a chance, and maybe draft a quarterback next year if he doesn't pan out. So I think they're right here. Gardner is going to be the selection.
Yeah, I really like that. I think Gardner has a spot on any team in the top 10. I think he is the most polarizing sort of figure on the defensive side of the ball during this draft. And like I said, he hadn't allowed a touchdown last year, so any team could use him at this point. But we're back in New York, and this is a pick I think the Jets might listen for some trade offers, but we're not trading during this one. However, the Jets still need some defense, and defense wins championships, and I think they know that. Offensively, I think they're okay. They really don't need anything on the offensive line. It's way too high to look for a tight end, but they did sign CJ Uzomah, so that worry is off the board. They have a good receiving core. You could entertain a receiver right here because you did lose Jamison Crowder. All right, so I think there's only 2 options: receiver or edge rusher for the Jets here. And I'm going to lean towards receiver here, simply because I think they can acquire an edge rusher maybe later, and they need that elite receiver to pair with Elijah Moore. So I will be selecting. This is disgusting for me, to be totally honest, because he's my favorite receiver in the draft.
Mm-hmm.
Jameson Williams is going to go to the Jets, and this could be
Rest in
high.
peace to his career.
This could be high for Williams because of that ACL injury, but I don't think it should be. I think he is solid, and if he's not ready for the preseason, whatever. He's an otherworldly talented receiver. Alabama breeds these receivers. I love him. Just pains me to go to the Jets right here.
Well, I think that you make an interesting case because obviously if Sauce Gardner, I think if he falls to pick number 10, the Jets snag him up immediately because they desperately need a corner. Right now they only have one guy who is even viable on that team. So they need corners. All right. So right now they need that. However, he's not on the board anymore, and there's no one really that makes sense for them here. I think that reaching for a corner is not the answer. I think they, like you said, they could trade away from this pick, but I don't think they will actually in this draft. I think they're going to go ahead and snag another player at pick number 10, and that player is actually you mentioned wide receiver, and talking about how the Jets they need a top-notch receiver to pair with the other players that they already have. And I think it says a lot, the fact that they went all in to try and get Tyreek Hill and failed to do so. And then they also apparently have had some interest in Deebo Samuel, who now is requesting a trade from the 49ers, assuming that doesn't go the Jets' way, as most things don't. We're going to go ahead and give them a receiver here. However, I do not think that it's Jameson Williams. I think they need a number one receiver, and that number one guy is more of a Garrett Wilson type. And so we're going to go ahead and have him at number 10 for me. I think he fits the mold pretty well for this Jets team. They need a receiver. Let me rephrase that. They don't need a receiver, but for some reason they really want a receiver. And they're looking for not just any type of receiver. They want a number one guy, because that's what Tyreek Hill was. He was a number one guy, okay, who happened to also be able to play in the slot. Garrett Wilson is a number one guy who I'm sure could play in the slot if they ask him to do so. So right there's your answer. He's the plug and play guy. And I think that he could fit on this Jets roster and just continue to do this whole build around Zach Wilson theme. Okay. And so I think that they're going to give him as many weapons as physically possible. So there's no excuse when they go ahead and let him off the team in two or 3 years.
It's inevitable, right? The Jets and their quarterbacks. But, I like the pick. If Wilson was still on my board, I think he's a slam dunk pick here too. Because Wilson's the first guy off the board in both of our minds, even though he went in a couple different spots. Like I said, I love Williams. It would pain me for him to go to the Jets, but it makes sense for him at this point in where my draft has fallen, at least. So I'm going to go to I almost said football team. I'm going to go to the Commanders now. All right, they solved quarterback for a little bit, at least. They have a stopgap guy in Carson Wentz. Their team was just they fell short of expectations last year, if we're being totally honest. Their defense fell flat on their face. The injury to Chase Young, different sport. Chase Young was really detrimental to that front. Now they did lose guys like Shy Tuttle up front. Tim Settle, but that's not really going to help their draft scenario to go grab a replacement for Tim Settle, because they have an elite defensive line to begin with. So here, I'm actually going to lean offense. And we saw them lose a couple pieces of their offensive line over the past few seasons. Now, they did grab guys like Andrew Norwell and Cornelius Lucas this offseason, because they did lose Brandon Scherf. However, the tackle situation still has me concerned. And really, there's no glaring position of need for the Commanders at this time. They need a tight end, but like you said, you're not going to get a tight end at this point in the draft. You can get that in the third round and be totally fine. So the pick for me here is really a kind of a difficult one, because I don't know exactly what they are prioritizing. But I'm going to go with Charles Cross here, the offensive tackle from Mississippi State. I think it's kind of an ugly pick for me, if I'm being honest, but it's one that the football team could benefit from. Football team, damn it. The Commanders could. Why do they do this to us every year? But I think he fits the mold for what they want to do because they run a lot of, running back passes out of the backfield. If Cross can swing out and steal off the edge, you're going to get guys like McKissick and Gibson out there running free. And that's what they need. They had success running up the middle last year, but I think getting to the edge has been a problem. So if Cross can be that guy with his athleticism to get to the edge and help these young backs create space, the Commanders, my God, are going to do just fine. So I'm sorry. This is my current board for you folks on Twitter and YouTube. Charles Cross is my pick at the 11th spot.
Well, I'm going to jump in here and talk a little bit. I like what you said about how the football team, they don't have any huge glaring needs because they're a team that they could use pieces, they could use talented players, but they have stopgaps everywhere essentially, except for one position. There's one position that I don't think that they have a stopgap at. And you mentioned, offensive tackle, and that does make a lot of sense because they have desperately needed offensive linemen for quite a few seasons now at this point. However, I think they're going to continue the trend of neglecting that because we just don't care about offensive linemen out there in Washington, I guess. Something about the city of Washington and not caring must be something that go hand in hand.
They don't care about their stadium. They don't care about their team or their fans. So
yeah, so I'm going to go ahead and say they just don't care about offensive line either, and they're going to go somewhere else with this pick. And I think that the glaring need for them right now, especially with some possible trade talks about a certain superstar on their roster, which supposedly they are not interested in moving said player, but things can change, and that is Scary Terry. He is currently being touted as someone that people are interested in.
He's waiting for a deal too.
Yes. And so I think that if, let's say, they somehow lose him over the next season or so, then that means that they don't have anyone in terms of offensive playmakers. They got Curtis Samuel, who I think his deal should be expiring soon too. So they don't really have anyone. So they need to go ahead and get a playmaker. And now the question is, which one fits the mold of this offense more? Okay. And I think that it could be someone like Chris Olave. Could make a lot of sense here, but I think they go ahead and go with Jameson Williams. They take a risk and go with a guy who could end up being the top-notch player because at the end of the day, I think that Ron Rivera is not scared of ACL injuries. He's seen it before, and I think that he believes that the players nowadays, like everyone else is starting to believe, can come back and make huge impacts after an ACL tear. It's not the type of huge, career-ending injury that it once was. So I think Jameson Williams going with the Commanders here at pick number 11 makes a lot of sense because that all of a sudden gives them two top-notch receivers whenever Williams can finally hit the field.
Yeah, they got to retain Scary Terry. He is a major part of that offense, and they would be silly not to pay him. But I'm going to keep going. We are on the Vikings now. Taylor, your team. So I'm sure you have a lot of interesting thoughts about them, and we'll get to you in just a second. So I'm going to take a stab at them first. Got the chance to see the Vikings play in person last year. It was a lot of fun, and I noticed some team needs of theirs. All right. So really, I think the main priority is defense right now for the Vikings. Taylor, would you agree with me?
Yes.
All right. So the thing is, they have a couple of positions of need on the defense, including corner and defensive tackle. And there are two guys in mind. It's a toss-up for me between Jordan Davis and Derek Stingley Jr. right now. They did bring Pat Pete back, and I know they want to try and get Cam Dantzler going. And I think that with the new coaching staff in there, they basically all came from the Rams. And the Rams excelled at both of these positions, defensive tackle and corner. So, pick your poison essentially. But I think the Vikings are going to go with a player who's going to be on the field more. All right. Jordan Davis is not that guy. Derek Stingley Jr. is the guy from LSU. All right. We've seen a lot of LSU corners come into the league. Tyrann Mathieu played corner when he was at LSU for a bit. Pat Pete, who is on the Vikings right now. So there's that connection with Stingley. But I don't go Jordan Davis here because I truthfully don't believe that he can play every single down in the NFL. He's massive, 6'8", 350-ish pounds or whatever. He showed out at the combine, which was for his stock. But for me, I want the guy who's going to be on the field for 100% of my defensive snaps, and someone who can replace Pat Pete in the next 1 to 2 years and become the top guy on your roster. And I think Stingley is the pick here for the Vikings, staying in the purple and gold, if you will. Taylor, your thoughts?
It's funny because Minnesota, let me tell you, I completely agree that if you look at the way that they're situated right now, I think that where their pick falls, they're going to have a chance at most likely one of the following players: Jordan Davis, Derek Stingley, and then also the next corner off the board. I'm drawing a blank on his name, Trent McDuffie. I think that one of those guys will be the pick here for the Vikings. The question is, who is it going to be? Because they need defensive help. And I'm going to tell you the very simple answer that's going to get you exactly what position they're going to draft here. And it is one thing. They fired Mike Zimmer. Okay. Yep. What that means exactly is if you look at what Mike Zimmer and that team has done under Mike Zimmer, all right, they went out and they just sign and draft and sign defensive tackles. And I think the Vikings fans, as well as the ownership, is tired of that because what has it gotten them? Okay. It hasn't gotten them anything, or essentially. And they went out and they did sign Harrison Phillips from Buffalo in free agency to fill the void of the run stuffing defensive tackle to pair up in the middle. And so what that means for the Vikings is they don't have necessarily the biggest need. They have an answer there. All right. So I think they're going to go corner. They desperately saw corner was the weakest position for the Vikings all of last season. It was the number one reason why they lost a record-setting number of games in the final one-score games. They literally set the record for most one-score games in NFL history. And I think that's the reason, is that the secondary was terrible. Pat Pete, he did his all, but he's only one player and he's, on the tail end of his career. And I think it makes sense for them to draft corner. And right now, the best corner on the board for the Vikings will be Derek Stingley Jr. And I think that it is a perfect fit. You made the connection of LSU with Pat Pete. Pat Pete has been really pulling for a lot of guys, like the linebacker who they signed in free agency. Pat Pete's former teammate at Arizona was just signed. Jordan Hicks, yes, the inside linebacker, and he pulled for that. He pulled to have that happen. I think he's also going to try and make a connection here with Derek Stingley, and he's going to be the mentor for him when he comes into the league. And it just makes the most sense because right now, assuming that maybe Cam Dantzler pans out for the Vikings, they have one guy for the future, but that's one. And usually you have at least 3 corners on the field at any given time. So what that means is they need a couple more. So Stingley's going to be the pick here for the Vikings, and it just makes the most sense for me.
Yeah, I'm glad we're on the same page about the Vikings. So I guess I nailed my pick then. But, we'll see what happens when we get the Steelers. So the Texans are back on the clock. And I don't think the Texans are in the market to trade out of this pick at all. Now, they could surprise us come draft night. But that team, I think, honestly, they have a good future ahead of them. They need a couple of pieces. But I truthfully think the Texans are going to be a team that we look out for in a couple of seasons if they acquire the right talent. So for me, it is focusing on the defense still. And there's 2 guys. It's edge position for me. They don't have an elite edge rusher on the team. George Karloftis and Jermaine Johnson are the 2 guys I'm tossing up here. However, to me, I think the injury concerns with Karloftis sort of steer teams away until later in the first. So Jermaine Johnson is going to be the pick here. He transferred from Georgia to Florida State and broke out. He's able to put his hand in the dirt and play. He's also able to stand up over the tackle and rush the passer that way. So he's a guy who can do it all for the Texans. And I think this is going to be a draft, very similar to what the Panthers did a little bit ago. They draft defense heavy. And when you have 2 picks in the top, 13, you need to get the best guys at each position. And I think that's what they're doing with the guys that are at least on the board for them. Trayvon Walker's not going to fall 13. If he did by some stretch of the imagination, then the Texans are going to be right there to scoop him up. But Sauce Gardner at 3 and Jermaine Johnson at 13, I think are going to set the tone for the defense for the next few seasons of young, fast, smart football. So give me Jermaine Johnson here at 13. I think it's a slam dunk pick for the Texans. If any of the above defensive players end up falling to them, I think they can take him there as well. But Johnson's just calling to be in the Texans red and blue for me. So I like him there. Taylor, you're on the clock now as the Texans GM. Who do you take?
Well, I think that I earlier in the draft had them taking an offensive tackle to set the tone on the offensive side of the ball, finish pretty much solidifying the tackle position for them because they have Tunsil already. They got their rookie with the 3rd pick, so they don't need an offensive tackle. What that means is they can go ahead and focus on the defensive side of the ball, which is exactly what I had them doing here at pick number 13. I think at 13, they need to get a defensive, like you mentioned, a tone setter, someone who's going to come into the game and immediately make an impact. And I think that out of all of the guys who are on the board, someone's going to fall to them at 13, and they're just going to scoop up whoever's left. All right. And so what that means for them is this guy went ahead and fell to them, and that is Jordan Davis. He is going to be the pick here for the Texans, because if you look at what the Texans have lost over the last few seasons, they've lost their entire pass rush. All right. And one of those things was DJ Reader, who left to a few years ago and went to the Cincinnati Bengals, and they never got a replacement really for him. So Jordan Davis, being as athletic as he is, I think a lot of people are going to look at him and see shades of JJ Watt. Obviously a bigger JJ Watt, but still see shades of JJ Watt in him. And I think that obviously the Texans in their history have been known to go ahead and draft, defensive players high in the draft and make them stone pieces pretty much all across their history. One of their first picks was Mario Davis many, many years ago. And he went out and was a centerpiece on that defense for many years. So, and then they have JJ Watt, and now I think they're going to go ahead and get Jordan Davis to be that guy, because right now I don't think that any of these other guys make a lot of sense for them. Jordan Davis is the guy who fell to them, and I think they're going to scoop him up as long as the Vikings don't take him at 12.
Is it bad that I like your pick more than mine?
Honestly,
you're making great points. But either way, they do need help on the defensive front, and either of these guys can help them. But Davis, I think you're spot on with it. So kudos to you for nailing that pick. I really like it. Davis is still on my board, and I'll get to my explanation for that in a little bit. But we're here at the Baltimore Ravens selection, my absolute arch nemesis team. So I'm going to have them get, let's see, who's at the bottom of the board here. But, all joking aside, the Ravens have a good team, and they just were burnt with injuries last year. So they have a couple of positions of need, and I really am not sure where they're going to go. They could use a tackle. I think it's a reach if they try and acquire a tackle this high at 14. They could use a corner to pair with Marlon Humphrey, because they had a lot of corner injuries last year. Honestly, the Ravens, they remind me of what the Commanders are. A team with not any glaring needs, because that team was just unhealthy last year. I think that's really all it came down to. So this is a tough pick for me. I want to give them a player who fits the Ravens mold of gritty, a tough football, a smart football player. And I'm having a tough time trying to figure out who fits that mold for them, if I'm being completely honest. But I think they're going to understand that they need somebody opposite of Marlon Humphrey. And they're going to grab Trent McDuffie from Washington. McDuffie's been climbing up people's boards recently, and I think he's a good player. You know, he had a good combine, which really helped him out. He's smart, and that's the kind of guy they need opposite of Marlon Humphrey. You know, while he was at Washington, he started 11 games as a true freshman, which really doesn't happen in the NCAA unless you're very talented. So McDuffie obviously has a talent aside. Good athlete, runs a 4.47. I think is a good fit here.
All right. Well, I'm going to jump in and talk a little bit about this Ravens team. And I think the Ravens, they do need some help, specifically along the defensive side of the football. You mentioned that they're kind of like the football team, or excuse me, the Commanders. Now it's my turn to do it. In terms of they don't necessarily have any huge needs. However, I disagree. There is one glaring need that they have, and I'm just going to explain to you what that is. So you mentioned defensively is probably where they're going to go with this pick, and I do believe it probably is, but there's one need that they need so much, and they went out and tried to get a player and almost signed them in free agency before they snatched it back like Anthony Barr, and that is Zadarius Smith, pass rusher, and I think that's exactly where they're going to go here with their pick, because since they didn't get Zadarius Smith, they need someone, because Wink Martindale out there is desperately trying to find.
Martindale's gone.
Oh, that's right. I forgot. But anyways,
he's with the Giants.
Well, with that in mind, I think that they need someone to fill the void of pass rusher nonetheless. Okay. Yeah. And so they're going to go ahead and snag a guy, and this person is going to be Jermaine Johnson here. I think that he fits what they do. They like to have their linebackers. If you look at the molds, that pass rushers who can mainly are pass rushers, but if they need to, can slip back into coverage. And Johnson proved at Florida State he can do just that. Whereas Karloftis is more of a pure pass rusher. And so I think that Johnson is going to probably be mainly a pass rusher in most of the situations. However, I think he's a good athletic fit for them to possibly slip back into coverage if they need him to do so.
Yeah, I like that pick a lot. I know they did end up getting Calais Campbell, who plays a little bit of the edge. He's more of a down in the dirt kind of guy. But you're right. They signed Josh Bynes, but he's an inside linebacker, so they need that outside presence on the team. So I like it a lot, Taylor. Good move there. And we're here with the Eagles now. And the Eagles have given their fans headaches over the past several seasons. They finally did the right thing by drafting Devonta Smith last year, but that's been 2 receivers in the first round for the past 2 years. Do they repeat for a third time? Truthfully, I think one of these 2 picks they do. Who do you have outside of Devonta Smith? Jalen Reagor sucks. J-Jaw sucks. Are you going to really tell me that Kaz Watkins is going to be your number 2 guy? Now, I don't know if they go with a receiver at 15 or at 18. One of these picks they could trade away and grab some capital because they're not a bad team. All right. They just had a couple of bad plays. They couldn't beat the Cowboys, that sort of thing. So they need to find a player to help them beat the Cowboys. And they don't have a glaring need, in my opinion. That a need as bad as somebody like the Jets, for example. But they could use a corner. Steven Nelson really wasn't good for them last year. They need some linebacker help, but there's not a linebacker up here who I would take at 15. I'm going to go with a receiver at 15 here, and I think they're going to go with Drake London. And Taylor, you know my disdain for Drake London. I don't think he is a very solidified route runner at this point. Great contested catcher, but I don't think he's going to be able to get open right away. So London's going to be the pick here. I think it's a very Eagles type of pick as well. Not necessarily the best possible receiver, but a guy who has potentially some hidden potential. I really don't know what the Eagles can think of London off the bat, but he's got to be better than Jalen Reagor. So London's the pick here at 15 for me. I'm not in love with it personally, but I think that's what the Eagles decide to do.
That's interesting. So I think that the Eagles, obviously, everyone remembers the trade that they recently made with the New Orleans Saints. They went ahead and traded 2 of their picks for a future pick from the Saints and the 15th overall pick, which I think, if I'm not mistaken, it ended up moving them obviously up a few selections.
Mm-hmm.
And what that meant for the Eagles is that I think they are preparing for the future in terms of that pick next year is what they mainly wanted. And it got them closer to getting a top tier talent. And I think that what they're going to do, if I had to take a guess with this pick, that first pick that the Eagles have, because they still have the pick at pick number 18. Now, if I had to take a guess at 15, they're going to take BPA. They're going to take a guy, whoever falls down the board for them. I think that's what they're going to do with that pick. And then the guy that they had targeted all along is where they're going to go with pick number 18, I think. So I'm going to go ahead and say that the Eagles go BPA. And looking at my board, obviously we have a couple of guys that are out here. I don't think they're going to go quarterback. I think they're going to try and let Jalen Hurts ride one more season out. At the end of the day, I think that one position, you mentioned it, is wide receiver. And I think that one person who has fallen down the board a little bit is Chris Olave, who they could take. However, I think that it's not going to be any of these. And the reason being, I don't necessarily know that the Eagles know what they want to do with this pick. And I'm going to say that they go ahead and do something a little bit more on the shocking side, believe it or not, and take, simply for the fact that the guy fell, take an offensive tackle. Now, I know they don't need him, okay? They don't necessarily need him in Charles Cross here, but I think that they go ahead and snag him because the offensive line out there for the Eagles, they're only getting older at this point. I think every single offensive lineman who they have out there is at least 32 years old or older. So what that means for the Eagles is, outside of Jordan Mailata, who is their current left tackle, they don't have an answer for the future. And so I think that Charles Cross, they're going to go ahead and snag him, because if they don't start making moves now to alleviate that issue, then the Eagles are going to be in a situation much like the Giants, where they have nobody, okay, along the offensive line, because all of those guys that they have, while they're all great players right now, they're all going to end up disappearing within a season or two of each other. So I think that's the move with the Eagles, and they mainly just take BPA here, and I think that is the best player for them at this selection.
Yeah, BPA is not a bad thing. We have 2 picks in the first round, and 3 teams have had that: the Eagles, the Giants, and the Jets. So we could see players who don't necessarily need to start right away for these teams, but I like the pick. I can't lie, I like the pick. So I'm going to go to the Saints now. The Saints, I'm having a tough time trying to diagnose what they need because is Winston going to be the answer? We don't know. What the heck are they doing with Taysom Hill? It's just a very confusing situation. Dennis Allen is their new coach. So the Sean Payton era is over. So maybe we see a change in the in sort of the needs of the team and how Dennis Allen wants to run things down there in New Orleans. And I think a great way to set the tone for what you need is someone to protect the quarterback. All right. And I don't know if Trevor Penning is going to be elite like Aquanu or Evan Neal, but I think he's a safe pick here because he does not need to start right away. And I think that the Saints can ease him into a situation where he becomes a good tackle in a year or so. So Penning's my guy. He's from Northern Iowa, so it's not a very high caliber football program, but he's a good blocker. He's 6'7", so he's got a ton of upper body energy and power to use. And one thing that I did see is that he's not very mobile. He can get beat by these pass rushers who have some speed, but I think with enough work, maybe he slims down a little bit. I think with enough work, Penning is going to be able to become a good offensive lineman here in a couple of seasons. So I think he's a safe pick here for the Saints at 16.
All right, I'm going to jump in and say one thing about the Saints is right now they desperately have glaring holes on this team. A lot of it has to do with the fact that they just don't have money right now, as
They haven't
everyone
had
has
money for
alluded to.
years.
Yeah, but it's gotten really bad out there in New Orleans. So they have huge holes at offensive tackle. And this is where if Charles Cross were to fall to them at 16, I think they scoop him up right there. However, in my mock, I didn't have him falling that far. Wish I did, however, I didn't. And then they also have glaring holes at a few other positions. Obviously, wide receiver outside of Michael Thomas, they don't have anyone really. They don't have a playmaker. So that could be somewhere that they go ahead and target. And then obviously they have holes at guard as well, cornerback, because they don't really have an answer outside of Marshawn Lattimore on the outside. Nickel Roby-Coleman at this point is quite old. And I don't even know if he's still on the roster anymore. And then they got safety issues ever since, and the situation, and this is probably one of the biggest holes that they have to fill this draft is safety, because Marcus Williams left the building. And right now, guess who the guy is?
They did bring in Marcus May.
Yes. However, they needed 2 safeties. So
Yes.
right now, the person who is currently in line to start for them is Daniel Sorensen.
Oh, God.
So he is
Look away, Chiefs fans.
Yeah, he is currently in line to start for the Saints. So I think that they do not like that situation. And I think they actually reach a little bit here at pick number 16, simply because they need the help at the back end. And they're going to go ahead and snag Daxton Hill from Michigan, the safety. I think that it might be a slight reach here, but I think at the end of the day, they desperately need that position. And I don't necessarily think that I think they're going to see the wide receiver class and say, I think we can wait at that. We don't have to grab a guy there. And the offensive tackles that are on the board, I don't think that they love at this point. So they're going to go ahead and get a safety, which right here, I think this is only the second safety off the board. So going to be probably a top, 2 or 3 safety in this draft class. So hopefully that hits for the Saints. And I think that it just makes a lot of sense for them. So then they have the defensive secondary, at least the back end of the defense, figured out.
Yeah, and we've seen it. If you can't defend the pass down the middle of the field, that's where a lot of teams are getting burnt these days with these speedy receivers. You're going to have a tough time winning football games. Defense wins championships. We say it all the time. So the Saints, I think their offense is okay. They could use a receiver, but this is a deep class, and they have a pick at pick 19. So maybe they use a receiver at that selection. But we're going to keep going here. We are at the Los Angeles Chargers, who have made a splash.
I'm going to go ahead and cut you off real quick. I'm going to go snag a drink real quick if you want to just take the lead.
I would love to take the lead. I always take the lead. So I'm going to take you off the stream too. But the Los Angeles Chargers are on the clock. This is a very difficult decision for me to make because they had a really, really solid free agency. They acquired a lot of talent. They like Khalil Mack and Sebastian Joseph Day. So do they necessarily need anything on the defensive side? I really don't know. It's a tough choice for me to pin a player to them. But my guess is if they do need something, it may be BPA for them. So I wouldn't be surprised if they want a rotational guy in Jordan Davis. And I think he's fallen too far. I think he would look really good in powder blue. So Jordan Davis is going to be my guy here at 17. I think he's fallen a little bit too far. My official mock will be coming out shortly before the draft next week. Excuse me, but Davis has fallen too far on my board. I just haven't found a nice place for him, except for right now. I know they signed a lot of good defensive talent, especially up front. But if you can get Davis to start his rookie year off easy, let him be a rotation guy with Sebastian Joseph Day. Let him be a rotation guy with Christian Covington, or any of the other guys that they have signed. I think you're going to do just fine. They don't necessarily need him, but if he's BPA at this point, why not? They signed 3 defensive tackles this offseason, but some of them could be cut candidates. I think Christian Covington's a cut candidate. You're obviously going to keep Sebastian Joseph Day and probably Austin Johnson. But if Jordan Davis can insert himself into this lineup on day one, we are not going to have a problem. Taylor, I'm glad to see you're back. I just put Jordan Davis on my pick for the Chargers here. And I cannot hear you at this point. So I'll pretend like I'm Taylor. Parker, that was just such a brilliant pick. I love your philosophy on football. You are the smartest duo. Are you there? Oh, he's still thinking of what to say to me because I'm such a genius. Nothing. Well, we seem to be exhibiting technical difficulties yet again, which is just fantastic because we had this same problem last night. But Taylor, until you try and get your audio figured out, I will commentate for you. Who do you want to pick at 17? Put your guy on the board, and I will pretend like I am you for a minute until you get your audio figured out. He's looking hard. He's looking deep. Now, here's a guy. That's Chris Collinsworth would say. I think Taylor's going to be leaning towards the defensive side of the ball. Now, they brought in a lot of talent on the defensive side of the ball. They do have a need on the offensive line. The Chargers do, but I think this team is sound offensively. They could use a piece on the offensive line, but if you take a look at what they did during the offseason, they brought in I guess they didn't really bring in many people. They did let go of Brian Bulaga, so maybe they could use a tackle at this point. I believe Taylor still has Trevor Penning still on his board, as well as other offensive tackles and guards like Zion Johnson, Kenyon Green, Tyler Linderbaum. So there's a lot of potential for an offensive lineman at this spot for Taylor. However, we do not know what he's going to be picking yet because we cannot hear him. He's giving me the finger right now. The silent finger, that is. And I no longer have Taylor on my screen. Well, thank you, Taylor, for joining us. We hope to have you back in just a minute. But for the meantime, all of our information can be found on Twitter at fantasyfballinfive.com. That's not it. FantasyFBallin5. That is our Twitter handle. I'm sorry, I got our website confused, which is my nice segue into saying you need to check out our website, www.fantasyfootballinfive.com. That is where you can find some of our most recent fantasy articles regarding the free agency that has sort of concluded at this point, but still very active. We have players being shipped all over the place now. And we also have our latest article written by myself is a deep dive into how the wide receiver market has sort of exploded in front of our faces. How Christian Kirk, of all people, reset the fantasy market and the wide receiver market in the NFL. Because let's be honest, Christian Kirk, is he really worth $15 million per season? No. But he got a 4-year, $72 million deal that ignited the money train, if you will, for the receivers in the NFL. Looks like I have Taylor back.
All right, can you hear me?
And we can hear Taylor. This is fantastic. Now, Taylor, I was just telling them that you thought I was the smartest person ever, and that I just have the wisdom of all the fantasy gods.
Yeah, I don't know about that, but I do have to say that the pick that you had with Jordan Davis was interesting. Because of all the moves they made along the defensive line.
They did. However, it was a BPA pick for me.
I mean, it makes sense, if there's a player like that on the board and even if it's not someone that you necessarily have a fit for, why not go ahead and snag them? So it's always good to go BPA. But for me, I had the Chargers snagging a guard here in Zion Johnson because That's probably one of their biggest needs right now. Is a little bit of help on the offensive line. They don't have a whole lot of holes right now. I thought about edge rusher, but with the addition of Khalil Mack, doesn't make a lot of sense. And then on top of that, there's just a lot of these positions didn't make the most sense for them. I thought about wide receiver, but they just re-signed Mike Williams long term. They still have Keenan Allen. So, and they have those young guys out there who seem to, I don't know, I thought they seemed to play pretty well for them. So I decided to go guard.
Very nice, very nice. All right. Well, they've heard me talk too much. So I'm going to give it to you for the Eagles pick at 18, their second pick in 4 selections.
Yes, and this is the pick that I have been waiting for. So I think the Eagles believe that someone was going to be there at this pick, and this was the guy that they wanted all along, as I said. And this is going to be the position that you gave them last, and that is the wide receiver position. And what's interesting here is both receivers who were on the board at their last selection are still there, shockingly. And both Chris Olave as well as Drake London, Treylon Burks is there as well. The trio there at wide receiver, all still there. I think that the question is, which one do they like the most? And believe it or not, I think that the Eagles are going to go a little bit outside of the box here and decide to go with something they haven't gone with yet. So recently, in terms of wide receivers, they got Jalen Reagor, you mentioned before, speedy guy, right? And then they turn around and they go out and get Devonta Smith, who also has some wheels to him, right? So I think they decide to do something different. Howie Roseman's like, I need different, all right, before the fans, castrate me. So they're going to go out and go ahead and get a big-bodied receiver, which could be Burks or London at this point. The question is, which one do they like more? And I'm going to go ahead and actually give them Drake London at this pick at number 18. I think that he fits the difference, which is what they want right now. And I think that in terms of overall talent, I think that they're going to go ahead and stray London over Treylon Burks, because now while Burks has the flashy hand size and all that different stuff, I think they're going to like the film that London has. He's got that catch point that I talked about yesterday, which no one got to hear about me talk about. However, he's got the ability to make the catch right there, go up. He doesn't have the speed, but I think London's the pick.
All right. Very, very nice. So the Eagles, like I said, have another pick here, pick 18. I don't know if they're trade candidates right now. They very well could be, because we've seen Howie Roseman wheel and deal a couple of times recently. So I'm going to assign them a position we have not drafted yet, because they need somebody to be the quarterback of the defense. And for me, that guy is going to be Devin Lloyd, our first linebacker off of the board. And one thing that stands out for Lloyd is his football IQ. He's a very smart football player, especially pre-snap. And, he's the guy who's going to have that green sticker on the back of his helmet. He's going to be the Mike linebacker. All right. He knows everything about what the quarterback is doing, what formations these offenses are in, what plays they're going to be running. That's Devin Lloyd's job right now for the Eagles, because they need somebody out there. Alex Singleton, he couldn't do the job, so he left the building. Duke Riley was a nobody for them. And I understand that they brought in Hassan Reddick, but he's an edge rusher. They need somebody in the middle as an inside linebacker. Devin Lloyd is going to be this guy for a few years for the Philadelphia Eagles.
Interesting. It's interesting because they signed not this season, but a season or two ago, Eric Wilson from the Minnesota Vikings. And while he did play outside linebacker, I think they ended up moving him to inside linebacker. Now, obviously, he may not be the answer for him long term, but I like the pick. I thought about actually Devin Lloyd when I was talking about the Eagles, but I decided to stray away from that because they desperately need receivers. So I'm going to talk about the Saints here, though, moving to pick number 19. I think that I've set myself up perfectly if I am the Saints, and they went ahead and reached a little bit for the safety. And so what they now have is whoever is available at pick 19 in terms of at wide receiver, because that's what they need right now. Obviously, I don't think they're going to go ahead and go tackle. It doesn't make sense for them to go ahead and go tackle, especially because, I mean, it makes sense, but I don't think that they have fallen in love with any of the tackles.
Whereas this one was bad.
Well, no. Yes. But anyways, I think that the Saints, they're going to go with wide receiver here with one of these two picks because they just don't have anyone outside of Michael Thomas. They need somebody to be a playmaker, and it's going to be the guy who is probably fits the mold of this Saints offense, and that's going to be Chris Olave, believe it or not, over Treylon Burks. I think Olave is the most he reminds me of not necessarily how big he is or the way the way he plays per se more. That is Marcus Colston, the Saints pick many moons ago. It's just like he's consistent. He's a possession type of receiver. He doesn't necessarily, he's got speed, but he doesn't have to, blow your doors off to win. He's got ability to with route running and everything. So I think Olave makes a lot of sense. So I'm going to go ahead and have him here with the Saints.
Yeah, this is a very good pick. And, I'm leaning receiver myself. And, it's a toss-up still for me between Treylon Burks and Chris Olave. Personally, I like Burks more just as a player. But as the prospect, I think I enjoy Chris Olave a little bit more. He's very refined as a route runner, which is something that the Saints need because Slant Boy, that's what he does. All right.
Slant Boy.
You need somebody to be not Slant Boy for a little bit, and that will be Chris Olave. He's going to be my pick as well. It's funny we finally agree on something this late in the draft, but it makes a lot of sense for the Saints right now. They need another guy, and Olave has the raw athleticism to make a name for himself in that offense.
All right, moving on to your favorite team here, the Pittsburgh Steelers. I'm curious, yes. Parker, where do you have the Steelers going? But I'm going to first talk about it because I know that, you probably want them going ahead and drafting, a quarterback because that's one of their top needs, obviously. But they went out and signed Mitch Trubisky.
You can slander him for now. It's all right.
But they went out and signed him. So they don't necessarily, it's not as much of a glaring hole as it would be if they didn't sign anybody. So they have a possibility to roll into the season with who they have on the roster. And what that means for the Steelers is I don't think they have to force themselves into taking a quarterback here. I don't think they do, believe it or not. And so I'm looking at, the needs that they have. They have some needs at offensive tackle. The offensive line in general was one of the big issues for the Steelers of last season. And then wide receiver right now is one of those issues that they have as well because, the loss of Juju. Right now they have Deontay Johnson and Chase Claypool. That's literally it. They don't have a third receiver. James Washington, I think, he's still on the team, right?
Now.
Dallas, that's right. And so they don't
have McLeod's in San Francisco.
Mm-hmm. And at cornerback, they did sign Levi Wallace, to fill that second QB, the cornerback spots for them. So they don't necessarily have to go out and get a corner in the first round. But I think at the end of the day, wide receiver is somewhere that they desperately need to go. And I think it just makes a lot of sense for them to take one here if one falls to them. But believe it or not, I don't have them doing that. I have them going out and getting an offensive lineman and Trevor Penning because it just makes sense to me that they need offensive line. It's one of the biggest issues that they had last season, and they're going to take the best one that's available. I know Treylon Burks would be interesting for them. I'm sure they're going to contemplate it if he's on the board, but I don't think they're going to go that route.
Yeah, I agree. Burks is the fun pick if he's available, but he's not the smart one.
And if you look at the Steelers in their history, they rarely draft receivers early. They mostly have their receivers late.
And they find good ones late all the time. So if you asked me before the free agency period, I would have given you a list of guys that would have been top priorities for the Steelers. But now you have James Daniels coming in. You have Mason Cole coming in. You re-signed Chukwuekwuemeka for. All these guys have multi-year deals. I think guard is out of the question for them right now because you're going to get Kevin Dotson back at left guard. James Daniels will play right guard. I don't know if the Steelers are really sold on Mason Cole, but they're going to give him the chance. I don't think Kenyon Green is going to last in Pittsburgh after his terrible season last year. The tackle position really interests me. I think if Penning was still available on my board, I think I might lean that way. But this has become a very difficult pick for me now. But I'm going to rock the boat. All right. And we're going to go with Kenny Pickett.
Here we go.
Shut up, Taylor. Kenny Pickett to me is a very good fit for what the Steelers are trying to do. And the great thing is, you don't need him this year. The Steelers weren't planning to start Big Ben 18 years ago. It was Tommy Maddox. And then they'll ease Ben into the system. Maddox gets hurt, Big Ben enters week 2, and the rest is history. Kenny Pickett does not need to start week 1. He doesn't need to start week 17. Or 18, I guess. Let him sit a year. And then, you can figure out what you want to do with Trubisky after that. Because it was a 2-year deal for Trubisky. And I don't think the Steelers would be shy to absorb some of his cap for that second season if Pickett is ready to go. My only concern, I hope he doesn't turn into Jordan Love. I guess I should share my screen over here. I just hope he doesn't turn into Jordan Love, where he doesn't be needed. But Mitch Trubisky isn't Aaron Rodgers. So Pickett, to me, is the long-term move for the Steelers here. He's the in-house pick. He played at Pitt. He played at Heinz Field. He's comfortable playing there. This is me trusting my gut right now.
Interesting. So I'm going to go ahead and move on to the next pick, which is the New England Patriots. And now the Patriots have glaring holes across their defense. And obviously,
too.
Yeah, surprisingly. And what's interesting to me is the fact that they went out and they made a trade for Devontae Parker, which I think that says to me that they are not going to go out and try and get a receiver, which means that, sorry, Treylon Burks fans, that he is not going to the Patriots and pairing up with Mac Jones. Not happening. What is going to happen, though, is probably going to be a defensive pick here. The question is, where do they need to go? Because they obviously need help at corner. They let some of the top corners hit the market in J.C. Jackson. And then obviously Stephon Gilmore, they traded away last season or season or two. Yeah, last season. And then you look at the safeties, they don't really have an answer at safety for the most part. So for me, if you look at what they have, obviously they could go linebacker too. That's another spot where Devin Lloyd makes a lot of sense. He's a Patriots type of guy, and I think that looking at the way that the Patriots roster shaped, they did sign Jawan Bentley back, if I'm not mistaken.
Yep.
But they did lose, Dante Hightower still, isn't he still out there? Which
I believe, yeah. And Chase Winovich left the building as well.
Exactly. And so I feel like they need help in the front seven as much as they need help in the secondary. I think they're going to go ahead and take someone in the front seven, that someone being Devin Lloyd here for me. I think that it just makes a lot of sense for them because they love their, linebackers out there in New England ever since 2000, really. They've had staple linebackers. Kyle Van Noy is still out there, but he didn't do a whole lot for him last season. Hightower's gone. Jawan Bentley played well, but he's now going to be shifted into probably Hightower's role, which means they need someone to replace Bentley and his role. So they need Devin Lloyd, and I think that makes a lot of sense for him. And I have him still on the board. And other than that, I think they'll probably go corner if they don't go Devin Lloyd.
I like the pick, Taylor. Very, very nice. I'm actually going to stay on the defensive side of the ball here as well. But I'm going to have a guy to replace Chase Winovich. And this is going to be George Karloftis, the edge rusher from Purdue, who had a really good breakout freshman and sophomore year with Purdue before going down with an injury. But the tape really stands out, and people think he could be a top 10 pick even if he falls to the right team. However, I don't think that's going to be the case. I think he falls back to the Patriots here, and is it just a direct replacement for Chase Winovich?
Interesting. Looking at the Green Bay Packers up next, they're going to be, this pick is probably going to be one that has a lot of people talking, because the Packers just, they love to meddle with things in the first round. I don't know why, but they do it. And so for for the Packers, that you look at it, and they have 2 first round picks. They got 22, they got 28. So what that means for them is everyone's going to say they're going to get a receiver. They're going to get a receiver. And while I think they could get one with their first pick and pick number 22, obviously on my board, Treylon Burks is still there. And outside of Burks, there's not, that top guy necessarily that is there. And so you look at it and you think, if they don't get a receiver at 22, they might end up with the second tier type of receiver if they get one at 28. And then you also have to think about the fact that, they have, needs on the defensive side of the ball. Obviously, Zadarius Smith left the building to go join Minnesota, the rival. And what's interesting about that is they don't really have a plug and play guy to replace him. And so for me, I think that George Karloftis, who's still on my board, could sneak in here with their first pick. It depends on how much they want to please Aaron Rodgers. If they really want to please Aaron Rodgers, they get Treylon Burks here. If they don't, and they continue to make him angry, they go out and get George Karloftis. However, I'm going to go ahead and say that they snag Treylon Burks here. I think it just makes the most sense because he fell down the board. He's still there at pick number 22. And so I think that in this situation, I don't think they're going to let Treylon Burks slip through their fingers, because if they do, then they're going to be waiting till pick 28. And at that point, you don't know who's going to be on the board. Maybe you got a guy like Christian Watson, but he's like a second tier receiver in this draft class. Or maybe Jahan Dotson could be a guy that they go out and snag. And, it's interesting to me, but I don't think that it makes the most sense. I think that at the end of the day, it's going to end up being Treylon Burks over George Karloftis here, which is kind of shocking, I'm sure, to some people, but not really, because the wide receiver Aaron Rodgers has been so displeased out there with Green Bay, and as a Vikings fan, I've loved it, But I think that at this point, if there will be such a backlash, both from fans, from Aaron Rodgers, from just the entire NFL sphere is going to have such a backlash towards, the front office of Green Bay if they do not get a receiver. And I don't think that they mess around. I think that they desperately need one right now, because MVS left the building, obviously signing with the Kansas City Chiefs. And so what that means is that's one less option that they have in their passing game. They got Alan Lazard as their number one receiver, who has dropped more passes than he's caught, I think, in his career. So let's be honest here. I think at the end of the day, Treylon Burks makes sense as if he's still on the board. He's a big-bodied guy. He could be a similar player in terms of just overall style to maybe, I don't know, James Jones. If you think about if you're comparing him to Packers receivers, James Jones could be a good comparison in terms of the way that he was a bigger receiver, had a really good connection with Aaron Rodgers. And you also look at Devontae Adams of late. He has had a great connection with Aaron Rodgers. And guess what? He's also another big bodied receiver. So I think that at the end of the day, you're going to have this big bodied receiver to fit that number one role that the Packers need right now. And Treylon Burks is the only guy that fits that, who is still there in terms of the first tier of receivers.
Taylor, thank you for sort of helping me out there during my technical difficulties. But I have been waiting for this pick because for me, it is also Treylon Burks. I think Burks is getting lucky right now, playing with a fantastic quarterback in Rodgers. This is only going to help his dynasty rookie stock. It's going to shoot up. We have him around the 106, 107. I think this could shoot him up to 103 if he gets to play with Rodgers for a couple seasons. So Burks is a great pick here, and he's a great replacement for Devontae Adams as well. So we're going to move to the Arizona Cardinals now, who have pick number 23. And the Cardinals, they're in a sticky situation. What the heck is going on with Kyler Murray? All right, I don't think he's going to go anywhere, truthfully, but he's being a pain in their ass right now. And he sort of needs to understand that football needs to be his priority, not being a drama queen. So I'm not sure where to draw the line for where the Cardinals are going to be drafting, or who they're going to draft, excuse me, because they have a few options. However, I think they could use some help at the corner position, but they could also go out and replace Chandler Jones. So do I want to go and reach for Arnold Ebiketie from Penn State? I could. Do I want to make the comfortable pick here with a corner? This is a tough pick for me. Taylor, you might have better insight because you are living out in Phoenix right now. But for me, I think they are going to need help replacing Chandler Jones. So this is going to be a reach, but I'm going to go grab Arnold Ebiketie from Penn State. He was fantastic at Penn State. He transferred from Temple and immediately became Penn State's best defensive player last year. And he was able to get to the passer all the time. He was just causing problems in the backfield. He's also a really solid tackler who can do it all at any sort of level you need him to play. So I think this is a very underrated pick, sort of like how they grabbed Zaven Collins last year. I think Ebiketie is a solid replacement for Chandler Jones.
Well, here's what I'm going to say. I think you hit the two needs, the absolute gigantuan needs that this Arizona Cardinals team has, and that is cornerback, because obviously I mentioned last season the fact that they had this veteran mold for corner, and it worked well, over the last 2 seasons. However, at this point, the players who they had are so old that they can't be viable for the future. They got Byron Murphy, and that's about it. Okay, and so they desperately need corner, but they also need, like you said, a replacement to Chandler Jones, because right now, if you look at the defensive front, they don't have a pass rusher. Their biggest pass rusher is J.J. Watt, who doesn't even play on the edge anymore. He's more of an interior lineman.
He also doesn't play half the season.
Exactly, and he's also injured. So you look at the fact that what do they have right now? They lost Hassan Reddick, over the last 2 seasons. They obviously now have lost Chandler Jones. So they just don't have a pass rusher. So I agree with you that they're going to go out and get a pass rusher here. And I actually have a guy who slipped down our boards, and specifically my board, and it's been slipping in general because of injury concerns, and that is George Karloftis. I think he fits in perfectly here for the Arizona Cardinals. I think that it's a need that they desperately have, and they can always get a cornerback in the second round and try and work with it from there. I don't necessarily think that they can get a top tier edge rusher in the second round.
Yeah, I agree. Edge rushers are becoming few and far between at this point in the draft. So that's why I wanted them to go up and get Ebiketie, because I think he can just fit seamlessly into that defensive scheme that Vance Joseph is running. So I could be wrong. And Ebiketie might be the guy who doesn't even go in the first round, but who knows? So we're going to move on to the Cowgirls now. They made a lot of moves in free agency because they had some money to spend, and they inevitably spent it. So a couple of their team needs, if you're unfamiliar with their sort of their roster structure right now, they need safety, defensive tackle, linebacker, the guard. They could use a few things, but nothing is pressing to me. All right. Recently, safeties have been in the news for them because of Kelvin Joseph getting into some sort of like hitting or like vehicular manslaughter type of thing. I don't even know what's going on with that guy right now. But I don't think they go safety because they ended up re-signing. Oh my gosh, I'm losing the name. But they re-signed a safety who was very good for them last year. And they brought in
Curse, or not Javon Curse.
Yes, J-Ron curse.
Yeah.
Not his dad. Although that I would pay to see that though. I'm not gonna lie. That would be kind of nice. This is a tough pick for me here, and I think they might end up going BPA at this point. And for me, that on the board right now is Matt Corral, but that makes literally no sense at all. So I'm kind of stuck here, and I'm going to go with a player that I truthfully don't know a whole lot about, but is going to help fill up that middle. It's going to be a Perion Winfrey, the defensive tackle from Oklahoma. The sort of the report on Winfrey is that he doesn't have great length for defensive tackle, but what he does bring to the table is explosiveness off the snap, and he has good lateral athleticism, to get through those gap blocks and sort of disrupt the double teaming that has to happen for some of these elite players. So I think he could help out with the absence of Randy Gregory. I know Gregory was a edge rusher, but getting a guy on the line to help out when you lose a player of Gregory's caliber is going to be really helpful. So Winfrey is going to be my pick here for the Cowboys.
Well, I think you're forgetting something, Parker.
I probably am. So.
And that is one thing. The Cowboys will be drafting one position guaranteed in this draft, and that is, well, let me rephrase that. One position at this specific pick guaranteed in the draft, and that is guard. All right. They don't have a starting guard right now. And so they are going to go out there and they are going to snag the top guard who is on the board. And right now that is Kenyon Green, who may very well end up being the top guard in the draft class, depending on how the careers pan out and the situations for these offensive linemen pan out. So they're going to go ahead and snag Kenyon Green, the Texas A&M guard. I think that he makes a lot of sense for him. Immediately plug and play guy. And if the Dallas Cowboys have been nothing but phenomenal over the last decade, and it is drafting offensive linemen in the first round. And that's exactly what they do right here with this pick. And now they have some holes at edge, wide receiver, and linebacker. However, I think they can fill those with the second and third round picks that they have. So I think they're going to go ahead and snag Kenyon Green here. Just makes the most sense. It's a plug and play guy on an offensive line. Could be any offensive line, but I think that he fits the mold of what the Dallas Cowboys are trying to do out there.
Yeah, I like it. You're right on with how the Cowboys have nailed the picks of their offensive line recently. It's been pretty much a guarantee hit for what the Cowboys have done defensively. So I'm going to, on the offensive line. So I'm going to go with the Bills here. Pick 25 for the Bills. And they did lose Levi Wallace. So there's a couple of needs at corner. I don't think they're going to entertain running back right now. All that would really just mess a lot of things up if they grabbed a running back right here. And they also have a need at DT. But here's my thing. I think they filled the need at DT with Tim Settle. So I think that need is sort of gone. Their guard situation, I'm not convinced of right now. They matched the Bears offer for Ryan Bates. So Ryan Bates is on the team as well as a young Cody Ford. This could be looked at as maybe we get somebody to come in for Ford once his contract is up at the end of the season. Excuse me. But I don't think they worry about it. I think what the Bills need to do is address the opposite side of Tre'Davious White. And they're going to go with the best corner available in Andrew Booth Jr. from Clemson.
Interesting. So I do agree that the Bills' top need is going to be cornerback coming into this draft class, and there will be corners available for them at pick number 25. It's just a question of which ones. And so right now on my board, I have Andrew Booth Jr., I have Khair Elam, as well as Trent McDuffie. And so I actually think that they're going to go ahead and snag Trent McDuffie here to be the number 2 cornerback opposite of their superstar Tre'Davious White. It just makes a lot of sense for them. So I think that's going to be the selection here. At the end of the day, it's probably their biggest glaring need. Like you said, running back, they could draft Breece Hall here, but
That
I
would
don't
just
think they're
mess so many things up.
I don't think they're going to do it simply because they don't utilize the running game. Now, unless something changes and maybe, I'm drawing a blank on the head coach, Sean, not
McDermott.
McVay. Yeah, thank you. Sean McDermott. I think that unless he changes something during this offseason in terms of the play style that they have, which I don't see that happening, I don't think they're going to go out and draft a running back with their first pick. I think Trent McDuffie is going to be the plug and play guy because if they don't get a corner here, they risk not having guys viable to start on the outside come their next pick.
Yeah, good point there. Trent McDuffie is related to OJ McDuffie?
Oh, I did not.
I'm wondering. I don't know. I'm asking.
Okay.
Yeah.
I have no idea.
But either way, we're out of the Titans now, and to me, this is a no-brainer pick for the Titans. You look who they have on the offensive line, especially up the middle. It's nobody. It is nobody. So you run your offense through Derrick Henry. So why don't you let Derrick Henry run through your offensive linemen? And the holes they create, nonetheless, and that's going to be Tyler Linderbaum, the center from Iowa. He, to me, is the common sense pick. He could have gone anywhere. I almost put him to the Steelers, but things have changed for that team. So he's going to go to the Titans here. And I think this is a very solid pick. The Titans really haven't had much luck drafting offensive linemen recently. Thank you, Isaiah Wilson. But I think this pick is going to make a lot of sense. Iowa offensive linemen come out ready to play. Am I sure about what?
That pick makes a lot of sense because they did just re-sign Ben Jones. So I was just wondering to make sure that I wasn't unless they were going to push him elsewhere across that offensive line.
I think they could because I think I think they can move either Linderbaum or Ben Jones. But Ben Jones is a 2-year deal. He is old. So maybe this pick makes sense, maybe not. But I like Linderbaum here. I think he's fallen too far anyways.
Interesting. So I don't know. It's tough because for me, the Titans are in a situation where they have some needs where obviously they need linebacker. Jayon Brown is gone. They also lost on whoever. I'm drawing a blank on the other guy. Anyways,
I couldn't help you right now.
An inside linebacker for them. They had 2 of them. They're both gone. Okay.
And why the only names coming to mind is Wesley Woodyard, but I know that's not right.
No. Anyways, wide receiver is also a huge need for him because they tried the whole Julio Jones experiment that failed epically. They have AJ Brown, but they don't have anyone else to pair up with AJ Brown. And if we really
did sign Robert Woods,
yes, they traded for Robert Woods, but he's long term he's not the answer by any means. And so I think that they could draft a receiver or they could draft a linebacker. Now, looking at the guys who I have on the board, none of those positions make a lot of sense except for one, that is linebacker. They're going to go ahead and draft Nakobe Dean from Georgia, the inside linebacker who, it's interesting because he's a little bit smaller in terms of he's only 5'11". If you look at it, he's a little bit smaller in terms of it, linebacker. And I think that he could be someone who is a little bit speedy, brings a little bit of a different element to that position for them. Honestly, he reminds me a little bit of, believe it or not necessarily the way he plays, but just size and possibility for speed as Isaiah Simmons. Okay. Very interesting just because, size wise, speed wise, makes sense. Not necessarily the way that he plays, but I think Dean could be a perfect fit to try and push this Titans defense that has up to this point has been so set in mold of like the old school linebackers, big guys, who hit hard and, they can't move the quickest. And now they're going to try and switch things up here, I think, with Nakobe Dean.
I like it. I like it a lot, honestly. Dean is a guy who I have been keeping an eye on for a while, and playing at Georgia does you a lot of favors. You are a great player if you go and play at Georgia, and Dean and Devonta Wyatt and Trayvon Walker and Jordan Davis, great. That might be one of the best defenses in college football we've ever seen. If you have 5 first rounders, or at least 4 to this point, so yeah, good pick, Taylor. But we're on to the Bucks. Always a polarizing figure when it comes to the draft. Now that Tom Brady's coming back, unfortunately. So this is a tough pick for me, honestly, because I think the Bucks are pretty set at a lot of different spots, but I'm not really convinced that they're going to go out and pick somebody as a reach. They might just go BPA at this point. But it's a new system. Bruce Arians is no longer the head guy. We have Byron Leftwich in, so maybe he's looking to revitalize his team somehow. But to me, they have a big need, not necessarily a huge need, but they have a need at guard. And I have a couple of guards still available, including Zion Johnson, who, Taylor, I think you have had already off of your board, if I'm not mistaken.
Yep.
Yeah. So they did bring in Shaq Mason, which is a good thing. But I don't know. I'm stuck here, to be completely honest with you. I'm stuck. But I think I'm gonna roll with it. I'm trust my gut, and they're gonna put Zion Johnson to pair with Shaq Mason.
It makes a lot of sense, actually. I really like that pick. I wish I had a guard available that made sense to put there, because the simple fact is, yes, they went out and traded for Shaq Mason, who immediately fills the role of Alex Kappa, who left during free agency. However, they also lost their top guard in before free agency, really, in Ali Marpet, who retired.
Yeah.
So right now they don't have a guard to fill that role, and I think that's a perfect fit for them. Great selection.
I knew I was
don't have
missing
any.
somebody as I was talking, because it just made sense. I was like, well, they need a guard, but whatever.
Yes, it does make a lot of sense. If I had a top guard available, I would probably mock him to them. However, right now I do not. So I'm going to go ahead and do a different route. A lot of people might say that corner could be an issue for them, as they did, they did struggle a little bit down the stretch. However, I disagree. I don't think they're going to go with corner in the first round. They can get one late and be just fine as a depth piece. I think that in terms of one of their top needs, it is actually defensive tackle because right now they lost Ndamukong Suh, who went out.
Have not brought him back
and did not bring him back, and he didn't look that great last time that they played. So looking at that, they needed defensive tackle fill in to go alongside Vita Vea, and I think that person, believe it or not, is not going to be Perion Winfrey from Oklahoma. It's going to be the Georgia defensive tackle who paired up with Jordan Davis and Devontae Wyatt.
He has been shooting up some draft boards.
Yes, I like him a lot. I think that wouldn't that just really jerk people's chains to the Bucks finally lose a player and they immediately get a replacement. So I don't know. It makes sense. Anywhere that Tom Brady is, talent will go. So I think that Devontae Wyatt is going to be following that suit and suiting up with one of the greatest of all time.
Well, Tom Brady jerked my chain when he came back again. So. Whatever, but Packers are on the clock again. And Taylor, I know you just love talking about the Packers, so I'll let you simmer while I talk about them. They're on the board again. We actually had them both getting Treylon Burks with the pick 22. Honestly, they could use another receiver for all we care. But we know that's not going to happen. So where do they turn to next? Do they go out and grab a guy to protect Aaron Rodgers? Maybe so. Do they go grab somebody to pair up with Rasul Douglas and Jair Alexander? I really don't think so. I think the move here is going to be Nakobe Dean. They did bring back Devondre Campbell, but Campbell can't do it all. Dean, I think he fits the mold of a Packer, to be completely honest. Taylor, you said he reminds you his speed of a little bit of Isaiah Simmons, which I agree. And, Campbell doesn't have the speed that Dean does, so they can balance each other out, If Dean can get to the edge, Campbell, he played extremely well last year and he can come off the edge as well. He doesn't necessarily need to be the middle linebacker that they might be looking for. So I like the pick here of Nakobe Dean.
Interesting. I do actually like that pick. If I would have had another linebacker available, could be a possibility for the Packers here. Obviously, they took one receiver, so they're not going to double up on receiver in the first round. I do think that they should draft at least one more receiver throughout, their draft. However, that's not going to be in the first round. What they're going to do now is focus on the defensive side of the football. You had them going linebacker, and looking at the guys who I have available, there isn't a top-notch linebacker that is really left on the board. I think the next guy is Quay Walker from Georgia. And so I don't think that it makes sense for them to reach for a linebacker. They have some other needs, though. Edge rusher. I talked about it with last time that I was talking about the Packers. They desperately need an edge rusher. And looking at the way that this team is set up, they also need corner. Okay, they have Jair Alexander, and they did manage to re-sign Rasul Douglas. However, outside of those two, they don't have really anything.
You get to make Kevin King still give me your CB3?
And so like they do need a corner as well. So obviously there are corners that are available. However, with the fact that they are available, I think that they go ahead and do something a little bit different. They need, knowing how the NFL plays nowadays, they need someone to replace Zadarius Smith. Okay, and I think that someone is going to end up being the edge rusher from Penn State. You probably know a little bit more about him than I do. And yep. Arnold, how do you say his last name, by the way?
Ebiketie.
Ebiketie. Okay. I think that he makes sense for them just in terms of he's got some speed to his game. And then on top of that, just he is a perfect plug and play guy to replace Zadarius Smith because right now they don't have anyone to do that. They still have Preston Smith on the roster. However, I don't think that he's not the long-term answer by any means. He's older than Zadarius Smith, I believe, or close to it.
Yep. Yeah, good pick there. I love Ebiketie myself. I would hate to see him as a Packer, though, just because I want him to play somewhere else. But no, good pick there. I honestly might have taken Ebiketie too high. I might have gotten a little greedy with it. But who knows? He's a guy that could be the unsung edge rusher of this draft class. So more power to him. We are at the Kansas City Chiefs now, the first of their back-to-back picks, which I fully expect them to trade out of one of them, being the Chiefs, and sort of stock up on some draft capital. But here we are, pick 29, almost done. And where do they go? They obviously don't need a quarterback. But they could use some I think so. They could use some safety help. They do have Juan Thornhill, but have not Honey Badger, not there anymore. So what are they up to? So Kansas City, they did sign Juju in free agency. However, they did just trade away Tyreek Hill, so maybe a receiver would make sense here. If they actually don't need safety, as they did sign Justin Reed this offseason, but they could potentially use an edge rusher here. It's a tough call for me, to be honest with you, because I'm not sure that the Chiefs necessarily take a pick here at 29. Maybe they wait and see if one player gets taken. Maybe that'll open the door for them. However, they need to make a pick in our draft. So here goes nothing, I guess. I think what would be best suited for the Chiefs right now is some defensive help because they were pretty bad last year. And I think Kaiir Elam from Florida at corner makes some sense here because they just don't have any top corners on their team. And I don't think Elam will be that guy day one either, but he can be a start. All right. I like Elam. He is my pick here for the Chiefs in their first pick.
Looking at the Chiefs' top needs, you hit it corner, one of their biggest needs right now. Charvarius Ward left the building in free agency. And then on top of that, I believe that they also just don't really have like that number one guy. Ever since Kendall Fuller left, they haven't had that number one guy. They got L'Jarius Sneed, who, plays quite well, but I don't think that he's necessarily top-notch guy. All right. And so outside of that, they really just don't have anyone else. So at corner is one of the biggest positions of need. They also have another position of need, which is edge rusher right now. And the problem is right now, looking at my board, I don't have an edge rusher who isn't going to be a very large reach right now. I have David Ojabo, who is probably the next one from Michigan, and that's pretty much it. So looking at it, I don't necessarily know where they're going to go. So I think that something that would be fun, okay, which I'll probably do within my next pick. All right. But I'm going to go ahead and snag the obvious one here, and Andrew Booth Jr. You went with Kyer Elam. I'm going to go with Booth because he's still on my board. He's going to be the plug and play guy at corner for him. And then my next, I'm just going to keep rolling into my next.
I have a hunch
selection.
what you're going to do, and this might be the same hunch I'm having.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
So looking at the situation for Kansas City, I could go edge rusher, and I might. However, actually, they could double dip at corner even. But I don't think they're going to do that. I think they're going to go ahead, assuming they stay in the pick. They are not going to snag the person who I think that a lot of people could see. I know you as a Penn State fan, and that's Jahan Dotson. However, I don't think that's going to.
That would make me act up.
I don't think that's going to happen. I don't think he finds his way in the first round. I think instead they're going to go ahead and snag the person that I'm sure a lot of people have probably touted, and that is Breece Hall, the Iowa State running back. And I'm going to say the reason being, I hate Clyde Edwards-Helaire. The man needs to get out of the NFL. I hate him. He's terrible. That is such a whiff. And if you are the Chiefs and you are looking to, push yourselves into the, top-notch offense, you need a running game. Okay. And Clyde Edwards-Helaire is not doing it for you. Okay. You need to get a top-notch running back. And Helaire could be a good, number 2 piece or something like that. However, he's not going to be a number 1 guy, or he could be trade bait for him, So I think Breece Hall is a perfect fit for this situation. And if he turns into what people are saying that he might, in terms of, Saquon Barkley and, Jonathan Taylor, all these different, comparisons, then I think that Kansas City would love to have him. And Andy Reid needs playmakers. With the loss of Tyreek Hill, that is a huge part of their offense that is gone. And yes, they signed Juju, but he doesn't fit the same type of role that Tyreek Hill brought to the table. Juju can't do the same things that Tyreek Hill did. He's a good receiver, right, but he doesn't fit the other things that Tyreek did. So I think that Breece Hall can alleviate that stress. We've seen Andy Reid run offenses through the rushing attack when LaShawn McCoy was part of his squads out there in Philly, and before that even. So I think that is something that he has, as a coach, is very capable of doing. So Breece Hall to the Chiefs just to be fun and shake things up.
Yeah, you took all the words right out of my mouth, and you took my pick as well. So, but yeah, this is fun. I think the Chiefs realized that they missed out dearly when they took Clyde Edwards-Helaire over Jonathan Taylor, and I don't think they're gonna make that same mistake twice. Breece Hall is the pick. It's fun or not, Breece Hall is the pick.
So, yeah, I think at the end of the day that the best teams in the NFL, when they make a mistake, they don't ponder on it. They make a mistake and they immediately move on, and that's what they need to do. And they need to admit that they missed and go on to the next guy.
Yes. All right, Taylor, I'm going to jump in and do the AFC champion Bengals here. Now, they have a lot of new pieces, especially on the offensive line, with 3 new acquisitions on 3-year deals to protect Joe Burrow. So they don't need offensive line, at least in my opinion right now. However, they couldn't go wrong with another offensive lineman. That's just not where I see them going. Personally, I think they re-up their defensive line and take Devontae Wyatt here. Because the way you win football is in the trenches. Obviously, we could say defense wins championships or a good offense will only win you games. There's so many sayings you can put into this football realm, but you got to win the battle of the trenches. People say that all the time. And I think Devontae Wyatt's a really good pick here. I know that they have DJ Reader. They've got Trey Hendrickson on the edge, and they have some rotational pass rushers who got good playing time and disrupted Patrick Mahomes in the playoffs. But you want a guy who's going to be there for the next 10 years, you get Devontae Wyatt. Because DJ Reader, I don't know how many years on his deal he has left, but I can't imagine the Bengals spending another big deal on him, especially with they're going to have to give Joe Burrow money at some point. They're going to have to give Jamar Chase and T. Higgins deals at some point. So I think they're going to let guys like Reader go. So Devontae Wyatt would be a really smart pick for the Bengals here.
You know, that's a pick that could net them some good, situation just to alleviate future issues that they have. However, they have issues right now. You alluded to the offensive line, and another issue that they have is actually corner. Corner
was
a huge liability.
That was going to be my next thing. They did re-sign Eli Apple, and they have Mike Hilton. Are you going to count on those guys?
We saw what happened. We saw what happened in the Super Bowl. All right.
We did.
Yes, Eli Apple played well up to that point, but he got kind of burnt, And at the end of the day, I don't necessarily know he's the answer long-term by any means. So I could go ahead here with my pick because I have Kaiir Elam still here. However, I'm not going to do that. They also need safety as well, which is something that people forget about. They have Von Bell right now, and they did go out and obviously bring back
Jesse Bates on the franchise tag.
Jesse Bates. Thank you. But they still have a need with Von Bell not necessarily being the answer at safety. But bigger than that, they signed Alex Kappa to a 4-year deal, which plug and play guard. And they also signed Ted Karras, who played center and guard. So, but his natural position is guard. Okay. And so they don't have a center right now to immediately fill that role. And one guy that I have on my board and you don't on yours is Tyler Linderbaum from Iowa. I think he is going to be a perfect plug and play guy for this offensive line and someone who can pair up with Joe Burrow for the next decade and be a perfect fit. And immediately it makes the fans happy, makes all of the NFL fans happy. No more Joe Burrow on his back. Yay. So, I think it's a win-win for the organization as well as the fans.
I'm going to raise you a quick question here. They did sign Ted Karras in free agency. So do you think they move Linderbaum or Karras to guard?
Well, the thing is, Ted Karras is not a center. He played center last year for the New England Patriots, but his natural position is guard. He's actually a guard who got moved to center because of injury issues with the New England Patriots. And so he played center, but his natural position is guard. Why force him to play center, if you can draft a guy to do that?
Yeah. That's why we saw Kendrick Green struggle with the Steelers last year. His natural position is guard. He couldn't play center. But I like it. So we're going to wrap up here with the Super Bowl champion Detroit Lions, obviously.
The Super Bowl champion Lions, huh?
I don't think that sentence will ever be said, but no, this is supposed to be the Rams pick, but obviously they got this pick in the Matt Stafford deal. So the Lions are going to round out our first round here just as they begin with the second overall pick. So, they're going to have a quick pick here in the second round too, so maybe they try and create some sort of tandem deal. I had them going Kayvon Thibodeau with their second overall pick, and here we are again on the board. I don't know what they do here, if I'm being honest. I still don't think they go quarterback. I still think they let Jared Goff test for another year. All right. But one thing that I think they could really benefit from is some defensive help. Obviously, we see that all the time. They could also use a receiver, however, because you are left with DJ Chark and Amon-Ra St. Brown. Then that's about it. You do have Quintez Cephas. But at the end of the day, I'm not sold that they're going to get a receiver with this pick because they have a quick turnaround. And it's a deep receiver class. So for me, there are 3 safeties I'm looking at right now. Daxton Hill, Lewis Sine, and Jaquan Brisker. You took Daxton Hill high in this draft. Higher than I will. He's very fast, 4.3 40, which is very nice. But for me, this might be a homer pick. I'm going to go with Jaquan Brisker here from Penn State. I think he's a more physical tool in the toolbox that the Lions could use here. truthfully, I think Brisker really does well in sort of that Tyrann Mathieu role of coming up in the box if needed, playing back, cutting off the half of the field. He's a smart player. I think his awareness as a young secondary guy in the league is really going to help him out, and the Lions could use that. So Jaquan Brisker for Penn State is going to finish off my mock draft.
All right, I like it. What's interesting is I don't have one of their top needs being safety, actually, because they did re-sign Tracy Walker, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, they did.
Which was he played quite well for them over the last few seasons. So I think that they don't have safety as a top need. And so I think the biggest needs for them outside of the quarterback position. So I don't think they're taking a QB here either. Okay, I think the reason they have those picks for the future is to take one next draft class. I think that's what they're waiting for, and they're going to ride with Jared Goff. I think that right now they have needs. You mentioned wide receiver. I also agree with you, though. I don't think they take one here. I think they can wait. It's a deep receiver class. And then they have two other needs on the defensive side of the ball, other than safety, that are bigger needs, I think, and that is linebacker and corner.
Yeah, right, I was about to say corner is bad because they whiffed on Jeff Okudah.
And now Okuda's been okay, but he hasn't been a top, number one corner that they expected him to be.
The number 3 overall pick, he was out. He was supposed to be.
And so I think that, Jeff Okudah is obviously a situation where they need to get a corner now. And so, but they also need a linebacker. And so the question is, do they go, for me, I have Kaiir Elam still on the board, so they could go that route, or they could turn around and go a little bit deeper in Quay Walker from Georgia, who I really like. Either of those guys could be the fits for the Lions. The question is, what do they need more right now? And so I think that personally, if I were the Lions, believe it or not, I'm not going to go Kaiir Elam. I'm going to go ahead and snag Quay Walker here. Go dive a little bit deeper. And it's simply because at the end of the day, I think that it makes the most sense for them because they need someone to help quarterback that defense into the future. And I think Quay Walker is an athletic guy who can do that for them. And he's also someone who, Dan Campbell is trying to build this like gritty defense up, and I think that's exactly what he's going to get. Whereas Kaiir Elam, he would be a good fit just for a position of need, but I don't necessarily think they're going to shy away from corner in the first round because I think they're scared, to be honest. And so I think
they don't want to get burnt again,
Exactly. And so I think they're going to go ahead and go linebacker instead, and rounds out the first round. Long podcast, long thing here, but gearing up for the NFL draft,
Yeah. Well, thank you for sticking around. And we're going to be releasing our final mocks on our website before the draft begins on April 28th. Our website is www.fantasyfootballinfive.com. So we can find a bunch of articles and insights as to what we have prepared for you this offseason. But Taylor, any final words?
Good luck to all you fantasy fans out there who are, hoping that one of your guys lands on the team that helps you in the future. But also for all you people who are just fans of the NFL, make sure to tune in to our live draft coverage on the night of the NFL draft. We'll be going live. It'll be probably longer than this, depending on how long the NFL draft takes. Yeah, so check that out. And hopefully you come to us for your draft coverage.
All right, Taylor, thank you so much. For Taylor Knowlton, my name is Parker Neal, and this was Fantasy Football in 5. Thank you for watching and listening today on the YouTube channel, Twitter, and our podcast. As you can see here on our screen, Taylor's got his Kickers Are People 2 shirt. Make sure to check out our merch line on Redbubble. You can just type in Fifth or fantasyfootballinfive.com. Or excuse me, Fantasy Football in 5, and it'll all be there. We have a couple of designs, including the logo you see in the top corner, as well as the Kickers Are People 2 shirt, which is always one of our popular ones. So make sure you're joining us next week, probably a week from when you'll see this podcast for the NFL draft. We'll have full coverage here on YouTube for you, so we can't wait to see you then. But thank you for listening. This was Fantasy Football in 5.